Chapter 674. Huzi looked at the 2 bottles in surprise and giggled. Hee, I'm so sorry. I didn't bring you anything when I came back, but you gave me something to eat. Bing Tang rolled her eyes. This is medicine. The medicine you make must be very delicious. Bing Tang's mouth twitched. She pulled Huzi's sleeve to the side and said in a low voice, Wang Yi asked me to make some medicine for him. It's not for you. When you go back later, help me give it to Wang Yi. I've written down how to eat it on a note and put it in the bottle. Huzi touched his nose awkwardly. But when he heard that Pang Xiao asked for it, he didn't think much of it and stuffed the bottle into his pocket. Bing Tang whispered again, don't let Wang Fei know about this medicine. Wang Fei is worried about Wang Yi. If she knew that Wang Yi asked for medicine, she would think too much. It's not good for her health to worry. Okay. If you don't want me to say it, then I won't say it. I'll listen to you. Huzi pulled Bing Tang's hand. Look at you. Your hand is cold. Let me warm it for you. Bing Tang rolled her eyes and tried to pull her hand away, but she couldn't. She blushed and started talking to Huzi again. Qin Yining, who was in the room, focused on writing a reply. She was not as thick-skinned as Pang Xiao. She did not want to let these trivial things affect Pang Xiao's mood. Therefore, she only chose to talk about happy things. She emphasized the 2 children's situation. The whole letter was filled with a faint warmth and longing that she had yet to put into words. When Huzi put in Qin Yining's reply, Pang Xiao stood at the side of the drill ground with his hands clasped behind his back. He watched Deng Minchang lead his brothers in training. Compared to the Tiger Army, whether it was the individual combat ability, the overall coordination of formations, or the morale and the determination of the soldiers, the army was lacking by a large margin. Pang Xiao had been leading troops for many years, so he naturally knew the scale in his heart. If this troop encountered the Tiger Army, and only 20,000 of the 100,000 Tiger Army soldiers came, he was confident that he could beat this troop that was said to have more than 100,000 soldiers without any chance of winning. Pang Xiao already had a way to train the soldiers, but it was not something that could be done in a day or 2. The first thing that needed to be done was General Deng Minchang. When he arrived at the barracks, Deng Minchang was in the main tent, hugging 2 beautiful women who were dressed as soldiers and drinking incoherently. Even if his own father came, he would not be able to recognize him. His tent did not look like the tent of a commander-in-chief, but more like the tent of a profligate. Aside from gold, silver, and jade, there was an endless supply of fine wine and delicacies. There were even 2 beautiful maidservants dressed as soldiers serving him. Pang Xiao did not even bring his family, but Deng Minchang actually hid 2 women in the barracks. Pang Xiao did not act out when Deng Minchang was drunk. When Deng Minchang sobered up the next day, he did not scold him at all. He only called the troops out for training. This round of training was even more chaotic. Some of the soldiers couldn't even withstand the normal training, including Deng Minchang. Pang Xiao suppressed his anger and seriously led the troops in training. These generals and lieutenants who had some status in the army seemed to treat him as a soft persimmon. They openly disobeyed his orders, and there were also those who spoke behind his back. Pang Xiao had been enduring silently, and this made them more and more daring. Yesterday, this group of people finally broke the military rules without any scruples. They began to drink and sing in broad daylight, and after a few words of persuasion, they actually started to beat people up. Pang Xiao immediately gave a military order to tie up the drunken men and deal with them when they sobered up. As for those who were not drunk and knew that they had broken the law, Pang Xiao simply served them with a military rod. Those who were drunk also ate stewed meat with the rod when they woke up. The law did not punish the majority. That did not exist. The troublemakers who were taught a lesson were brought to the training ground by Pang Xiao early in the morning. This group of people were still not convinced, so Pang Shao simply used his fists to teach them a lesson until they were convinced. Only then did the training go smoothly. The cold wind was biting cold. The hot sweat on Deng Minchang and the group of soldiers turned into white mist when it met with the cold air. Pang Shao pursed his lips and looked at all this in front of him. Although he was still not satisfied, at least this group of people behaved like soldiers. Even the troops who were not implicated today were now standing carefully by the side of the training ground. They were led by their respective sergeants and officers to watch General Deng's training. Pang Shao received the letter from Huzi. When he saw Qin Yining's familiar and beautiful handwriting on the envelope, he could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. However, he did not read the letter on the spot. Instead, he waited until the training time was over and returned to the tent before he impatiently tore open the letter. Although Qin Yining did not whisper any sweet words, the trivial family matters she wrote made Pang Zhao's heart feel as if it was soaked in warm water. Warm nostalgia wrapped around his heart, making him especially miss Qin Yining at this moment. He wanted to go home, hug Qin Yining, and hold his children. After Pang Shao finished his rough dinner, he kept reading the letter until he went to bed. He read it over and over again, and when no one was around, he put the letter to his nose and sniffed it. He did not know if it was a psychological effect, but he seemed to smell the faint jasmine fragrance on Qin Yining's body, her unique body fragrance, and the frankincense on the two children's bodies. He continued reading until midnight. When the light dimmed, he was about to fall asleep. Suddenly, there was a sound of footsteps outside the tent. Pang Shao alertly jumped up with a dagger in his hand. He turned around. Wang Yi. Hearing Huzi's voice, Pang Shao relaxed his tense muscles. Come in. Huzi quickly walked in and said in a low voice, Wang Yi, our family's people sent a letter. He handed over a note. Pang Shao left guards at home to protect Qin Yining. He trusted Qin Yining, so of course he would not let his own people spy on his wife. Therefore, Pang Shao knew that something must have happened when these people sent a message. He anxiously opened the note. When he saw it, he was both angry and amused. This little girl. She has guts. She actually learned how to visit prostitutes. She's in the hospital. What? Huzi was flabbergasted. This princess consort's list is too big. A woman going to visit prostitutes. She's in the hospital. Pang Shao cast a sidelong glance at Huzi. Not to mention my wife, even your family's Bing Tang went there. Huzi, master, I think they must have something serious to do. When I went back home today, there was nothing unusual. However, the princess consort is very independent. Perhaps she is doing something behind your back. It's not just Sister Yi. The master and servant are all like this. Pang Shao smiled ambiguously. He thought to himself, don't talk about my wife. Your wife is helping me make medicine behind your back. Go and find out what happened. Yes. Pang Shao could not leave the barracks, but Huzi could. He immediately gave the order and quickly left the barracks. Each Way Pavilion, the largest brothel in the old capital, welcomed a new and famous guest today. The brothel keeper of each Way Pavilion looked at the man who was led in by a large teapot and could not help but smile ambiguously. Even if he was a philanthropist who ran a congee factory, he was still a man. How could a man leave a woman? Master, please come in. Zhao Wanjin's expression was cold as he avoided the brothel keeper. The brothel keeper turned sideways and saw the person behind Zhao Wanjin. Oh my! What a handsome young master! The brothel keeper had never seen such a handsome young master in her life. Although he looked a little feminine, judging by his luxurious clothes, he must be rich and respectable. The brothel keeper's eyes turned and she understood. She knew it. How rich must he be to give out kanji for so many days? Moreover, even if he wanted to do good, he would not be so stupid as to go bankrupt. The money that could be used to do good must be a drop in the ocean for him. As a noble philanthropist, big philanthropist Chen seemed to be very respectful to this handsome young man. It seemed that they had a master and servant relationship. Perhaps the kanji factory was only able to continue operating because of the money from this handsome young master's family. The brothel keeper looked up and down at the young master, who looked to be about 14 or 15 years old, as if she could not get enough of him. Several guards looked at her with displeased eyes that were as sharp as knives. The brothel keeper was so frightened that she quickly lowered her head. "Do you have any girls that you like?" Zhao Wanjin said, "Choose your most gorgeous private room, serve the best food and wine, and choose the most beautiful girls." After thinking for a while, he pulled the brothel keeper to the side and gave her a silver ingot, "Find a few clean girls. Do you understand?" The brothel keeper looked up and saw Zhao Wanjin's expression. She immediately understood. Perhaps that handsome young master was here to eat meat. There was only one girl in each Shui pavilion who had not broken the melon, but she was someone that young Master Gao liked. The brothel keeper was a bit hesitant. Zhao Wanjin threw her another silver ingot. "What, is it difficult?" The two heavy silver ingots made the brothel keeper's eyes light up. Zhao Wanjin reached out and pretended to take the ingots back. How could the brothel keeper bear to? She quickly stuffed them into her bulging bosom and smiled. "It's not difficult at all. We are doing business, so we have to make our guests feel at home. Please come in." She turned around and called out, "Girls, come and serve us." In an instant, the largest private room on the second floor became lively. That young master was naturally Qin Yining disguised as a man. She was no stranger to these kinds of brothels. After all, she used to own such places in her business. Because the women here were used to dealing with men, she was afraid that they would see through her disguise. Therefore, she had specially asked Bing Tang to help her disguise. She hoped that no one would be able to recognize her as a woman, and no one would be able to tell that it was her. She had a straight face and a frown on her sword-like eyebrows. She sat upright in a room separated by a beaded curtain. She was already breastfeeding, and in order to disguise herself as a man, she had tightened her chest a bit. If she did not sit up straight, she would feel like she was suffocating. Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhua sat on her left and right. The rest of the guards stood behind Qin Yining. At this time, the brothel keeper called a group of gorgeously dressed girls to walk in. A gust of fragrant wind blew over, and Qin Yining almost sneezed. Chapter 675. This is our Yi-Chui Pavilion's new Miss Lame. She comes from a respectable family and is proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She's the best flirtatious flower. The brothel keeper winked and pushed Lame to Qin Yining's side. Qin Yining looked up and naturally moved aside to make room for Lame. She pulled Lame to sit next to her. When the brothel keeper saw that the charming young master was tempted, she immediately smiled and looked at Zhao Wanjin. Then she instructed the other girls, "Serve the young masters well." Zhao Wanjin laughed and threw her another ingot of silver. The brothel keeper immediately thanked him and left. Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhua were actually experienced in the field of romance, but Qin Yining was right next to them, so they couldn't show off. "Little sisters, are you good at singing?" Zhao Wanjin's big hand touched a girl in red beside him. The girl was observant. She saw that the man in front of her and the more elegant man next to him seemed to be afraid of the youngest charming young master. They wanted to get close to the young master, but they were stopped. She knew that they were here to talk business and not just to have fun. The girl in red smiled and said, "Sir, we don't have any other skills, but playing zither and singing are our specialty. If you like, we'll play a song. Good, good. Zhao Wanjin had been seduced by the soft voice. If he kept a few more girls by his side, wouldn't he make a fool of himself in front of the Alliance Master? Zhao Wanjin generously rewarded the girls. The girl in red led the way and stood up. Lame also stood up from Qin Yining's side and was about to leave with them. Qin Yining grabbed her hand and pulled her into his arms. Lame cried out in surprise and fell to sit next to Qin Yining. The girl in red and the others were surprised, but they understood. It seemed that this young master had taken a fancy to the new girl, Lame. Everyone tactfully retreated to the outer room, separated by a curtain, and played the song they were good at. Lame was Miss Yu, whose family was ruined by young Master Gao. At this time, her snow-white wrist was tightly grabbed by Qin Yining. She was embarrassed and angry, but she also felt a sense of destiny. Was this her fate? Was there really no way to avoid it? She knew very well what young Master Gao was up to. She even suspected that her father's case was secretly done by young Master Gao. Because in the old capital, if historian Gao wanted to do this kind of thing, there would be many ruffians below to help him do this kind of dirty work for various reasons. If it was just her, she would rather die than do this kind of shady business of serving men. However, her younger sister was still locked up by the procuress. If she was not obedient, she could not imagine what kind of life her younger sister would have. She could not die, so she could only work hard to live. Only by living could she take care of her younger sister and let her parents, who had died tragically, rest in peace. Lame's eyes were filled with tears, but she did not dare to let them fall. Her appearance of wanting to cry but not crying, wanting to laugh but not being able to laugh, was truly pitiful. Qin Yining thought about this girl's past and could not help but sigh. He did not want to continue scaring her, so he used his slender finger to tap the back of Lame's hand. When Lame's attention was attracted by him and she looked up, Qin Yining raised his slender finger and gently brushed his white earlobe. Lame looked carefully and her eyes suddenly widened. No wonder this young master was so handsome. He had pierced ears. He was actually a girl in disguise. She had tears in her eyes and her eyes widened in shock. She looked very cute. Qin Yining smiled. The corners of his eyes and brows were enchanting. However, he had thickened his brows, making them long and straight. The ends of his eyes were also slightly long and narrow. He did not have the gentleness of a woman, but instead had a masculine look. The curve of his lips made him look even more like a yuppie. Lame was immediately stunned by this. She did not expect that such a handsome young master was actually a girl in disguise. Her tense body suddenly relaxed. She was stunned for a long time before she gradually regained her senses. Only then did she realize that the sweat on her back had soaked through her undergarments. This, young master, you. Lame's voice was so hoarse that it sounded like it had been rubbed by sandpaper. Qin Yining waved his hand to interrupt her. He raised his chin with a smile and pointed outside. Lame immediately understood that he was afraid that they would say something that they should not say and that the people outside would hear. She immediately closed her mouth. However, she did not know this young lady and did not know what she was here for. Even if she was not a man and could not be asked to serve someone, she did not believe that she was here for no reason. She was just the daughter of an ordinary family. What was there to be interested in? Lame lowered her head and nervously clenched her fists again. Qin Yining saw that she was nervous, so he did not talk to her too much. He did not want to attract the attention and suspicion of the frightened young lady. Qin Yining began to eat with Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhuo. It was not good for her to speak too much in order to prevent others from hearing anything. Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhuo talked loudly about the current situation, policies, and the future arrangements for the kanji factory in the old capital. They looked like they were discussing business. Only then did Lame realize that this rich master, who looked somewhat refined but was still a rough man, was the famous philanthropist Chienda in the city. Lame's eyes suddenly lit up. She had some hope for the future. This philanthropist Chien had such a good heart. If she begged him, would she have a chance to escape from his evil clutches? Even if it was not possible, at least she could save her younger sister. Thinking of this, Lame seemed to have grasped the last straw. She got up and knelt down in front of Zhao Wanjin. His knees hit the wooden floor with a loud thud, startling the people playing the music outside. "Sir, this little girl is begging you to save my life." Zhao Wanjin looked at Qin Yining when he heard this. After Qin Yining slightly nodded, he said in a deep voice, "Little girl, why are you saying this? I am only a merchant. At most, I have some stinky money. I don't have any power or influence. How can I save your life? Or do you want me to redeem you?" When these words stopped in Lame's ears, it was like someone had slapped her face. She did have this thought in mind. But now that she thought about it, she was not related to this philanthropist Chien, and this was the first time she had met him. She did not know how to charm people like the other women in the restaurant. She also disdained using such methods. Could she let someone redeem her for free? Based on what? Chapter 676. Even those who didn't understand her family situation couldn't help but feel sympathy for her after hearing Lame's cries. This woman didn't care about her own life for her sister. Zhao Wanjin frowned and asked in a low voice, "I can understand your difficulties, but you and I have never met before. I also don't know if the situation you said is true or not." Lame nodded and wiped her tears. "I don't blame you for asking this. I was indeed rude. My surname is Yu and my name is Shifang. My parents opened a brush and ink shop to support me and my sister. Although we weren't rich, our days were peaceful and beautiful. Who knew that later on, I met young Master Gao. Young Master Gao was the only son of the local historian. He had some power and often did some despicable things, including kidnapping women. At first, he came to my shop for no reason and insisted on seeing me before he was willing to leave. No matter if my father rejected him politely or sternly, it was useless in front of young Master Gao. Young Master Gao even ordered people to climb over the wall to my courtyard and kidnap me. Fortunately, they were bidden out by the big dog we raised. Young Master Gao tried a few times but failed, so he came to my house to harass us even more. We were annoyed and planned to sell our shop and leave here. Who knew that my family would be involved in a lawsuit? They insisted that my father killed someone. My father was an honest person. In this life, he would feel guilty for a few days even if he killed a chicken. How could he kill someone? He refused to admit his guilt and was forced to confess. He was beaten to death on the spot. When my mother heard the news, she fainted on the spot. After lying down for a few days, she also passed away, leaving us two sisters behind. When Yu Shifang said this, her tears fell like rain. She almost couldn't speak clearly due to her sobbing. As she spoke, the hearts of everyone in the room became heavy. Even the girls who were playing the zither and singing outside the room were filled with sorrow. Which girl who was sold here didn't have a bitter account in their heart? Yu Shifang cried for a long time before she continued. The Yamen convicted my father and ordered us to compensate the deceased's orphan and widow's son clan. They confiscated our family's shop and said that we didn't have enough money. In the end, they forcefully sold me and my younger sister to Yi-Chui Pavilion. I didn't want to obey, so they used my sister to threaten me. Lord, what this little girl said is all true. If there's even half a word of falsehood, then let me be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. After death, you will be sent to the 18th level of hell, never to be reincarnated. After swearing the oath, Yu Shifang realized that she had spoken too harshly. She was afraid that the nobles would feel unlucky, so she forced herself to squeeze out a smile. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I'm already like this. Anyway, it's already like this. But my little sister is still young. I can't let my sister be ruined here. Even if she had to go out and beg for food, it would be better than this. I beg you, sir, please save my sister. Save my sister. As Yu Shifang spoke, she kowtowed to the three of them. Because she used too much force, it didn't take long for a bruise to appear on her forehead. Qin Yining had heard Yu Shifang's statement and confirmed that what she said was the same as what Master Zhong had investigated. His desire to save her became even more resolute. She glanced at Zhao Wanjin. Zhao Wanjin immediately understood and said, I understand. You can get up first. Yu Shifang's forehead was bruised, and her face was covered in tears. She didn't receive a definite answer, so she was very anxious. She really hoped that the people in front of her would nod their heads and agree. However, she also knew that they were neither relatives nor friends, and they didn't owe her anything. Looking at these people's appearances, she guessed that they came from wealthy families. Their families wouldn't lack servants, and they might not even take a liking to an 8-year-old girl. Moreover, redeeming an 8-year-old girl from here was many times more expensive than buying someone from a human trafficker. If they lacked servants, wouldn't they find a human trafficker to choose someone with a clean background? Thinking of this, Yu Shifang's heart turned cold. She understood that she couldn't continue to pester them, and she couldn't force others to help her just because she was pitiful. Yu Shifang closed her eyes in despair and bowed deeply, saying, This little girl doesn't know any better and has caused trouble for these sirs in a moment of desperation. Please don't take offense. After saying this, she stood up and retreated to a corner behind them to tidy herself up. Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinuo both sighed. Although they were once bandits who ruled over a mountain, they firmly believed that even bandits had their own principles and had never harmed an honest commoner. If their brothers on the mountain found out about what young Master Gao had done, they would be criticized for the rest of their lives. Therefore, when they saw that Yu Shifang was being tactful and disheartened, the two of them simultaneously looked towards Qin Yining. Qin Yining had already made up his mind to save Yu Shifang, so he naturally nodded. Zhao Wanjin quietly let out a sigh of relief and called out, Miss Yu. Before he could finish speaking, he heard a commotion outside the door. The brothel keeper's sticky voice with a hint of helplessness and fear could be heard from the other side of the door. "Oh, young Master Gao, please don't say that. We wouldn't dare. Wouldn't dare. This young master has already said that Miss Lame will be this young master's sooner or later. Sooner or later, I will have to redeem her. I gave you the money and you promised me. Why are you going back on your words?" The one who questioned her was a slightly sharp male voice. The brothel keeper said, "Young master, you must be joking. No matter how unsightly this place is, we still have to open our doors to do business. Otherwise, would the girls in the brothel be starving? You are a magnanimous person, so please be understanding. Moreover, Lame is only here to accompany you to drink a cup of wine and sing a small song. No one wants to spend the night with her. Lame is still being kept for you. Your mother's fart." Following the man's scolding, the door to the private room was kicked open. The sound of the door being kicked open was so loud that it scared the girls playing music outside into screaming and fleeing in all directions. Zhao Wanjin's eyes instantly flashed with excitement. He rubbed his palms together and suddenly stood up. He lifted the bead curtain and went outside. What is it? Could it be that this young master has entered the wrong room? As she spoke, she looked at young Master Gao from head to toe. She saw that he had an ordinary face with oily hair and a powdered face. He wore a large cloak with a fur collar and a warm hat. There was even a pink palace flower on the brim of the hat. His appearance was as gaudy could be. Young Master Gao sneered. He crossed his arms and raised his head to look at Zhao Wanjin, who was much taller than him. He sneered. This young master was wondering what kind of powerful person you were. Turns out you are just a nameless thing. The brothel keeper was so frightened that her entire body trembled. Just as she was about to introduce Zhao Wanjin, she was interrupted by young Master Gao. Chapter 677. What Zhao Wanjin disliked the most was this kind of greasy and powdered face young master who couldn't differentiate between the 4 limbs and the 5 grains. He was more capable than anyone when it came to committing crimes, but when he was asked to do something, he couldn't do anything. He could only rely on his father's and mother's abilities to bully some commoners. The tragedy of Miss Yu's family was already set in stone. It was Librarian Gao and young Master Gao's doing, yet this scoundrel still had the cheek to ask for her. Zhao Wanjin clenched his fists in his sleeves and sneered, "Young master, even if you come from a wealthy background, you still have to be reasonable, right? Everyone is here to have fun. Besides, everything has to be first come, first served. Let's play by ourselves. Don't cross the line. Who do you think you are?" Young Master Gao spat. "Why don't you ask around who has the final say in this old capital?" Young Master Gao crossed his arms and sized up Zhao Wanjin from head to toe. He said contemptuously, "Looks like you're not a local either. You have the air of a country bumpkin from the remote countryside. Have you not cleaned out the black mud under your fingernails? Yet you dare to come and straighten your back in front of your Grandpa Gao." He turned around and waved his hand at the attendants behind him. "Tell them who your Grandpa Gao is." Young Master Gao was followed by 2 servants and 4 tall and strong bodyguards. At this time, the servant who looked quite clever strode to the front and said arrogantly, "Listen, our young master is the son of Librarian Gao's family." After he finished speaking, he raised his chin and looked like he was waiting for everyone to be defeated. Who knew that after waiting for a long time, Zhao Wanjin didn't show any fear. Instead, he sneered and didn't put young Master Gao in his eyes. The servant was furious. He pointed at Zhao Wanjin and scolded, "You don't know what's good for you. He's willing to tell you his family name because he thinks highly of you. If you know what's good for you, quickly hand over the winter sweet. Otherwise, if you really anger our young master, you won't be able to bear the consequences. Do you believe that our old master will make it impossible for you to continue living in Dezhou?" "Hey! I really don't believe it." Zhao Wanjin cracked his knuckles as he cracked his knuckles. "Is your young master the crown prince?" Even if it was the crown prince, he had never heard of the emperor being so unreasonable for the sake of his son. The old capital was Dezhou's territory, but it was also the former capital of the Dian dynasty that submitted to Dezhou. "Why do you have so much power? Could it be that you are related to the original Dian imperial family? Are you still disloyal to the current emperor?" Although Zhao Wanjin was crude, there was a finesse to his crudeness. Even if he was being unreasonable, he still made the other party speechless. Young Master Gao was so angry that his face turned red. He angrily pointed at Zhao Wanjin and scolded, "Well, where did this scoundrel come from? I asked you for my winter sweet, but you refused to hand it over. You actually dare to falsely accuse my family. How can you be so shameless? You're the shameless one. Who is Lame to you? What right do you have to ask for him? I came here first, so I ordered the winter sweet first. No matter how powerful you, young Master Gao, are, you can't be so unreasonable as to interfere. Lame is my lover. If we talk about it, you should call me older brother. Go and ask Lame yourself, who got to know her first." Young Master Gao acted shamelessly and quarreled with Zhao Wanjin. Zhao Wanjin was not to be outdone. With Qin Yining's instructions, he naturally had no scruples. Young Master Gao was an arrogant and willful person. He was used to being domineering in the old capital. How could he yield to others? It had always been others who gave in to him. This time, he finally met a big guy who didn't take him seriously. Young Master Gao's anger rose. In a fit of anger, he immediately ordered the guards behind him, "Do it. Beat this ignorant thing to death. If he dies, it's on me." "Yes, young master." The guards and manservants who followed young Master Gao often helped the tyrant to do evil. It was a common occurrence for them to beat people up. Just now, when young Master Gao quarreled with someone, they were already eager to fight. At this moment, they did not hesitate and immediately rushed in front of Zhao Wanjin. Ah! The women were frightened and fled in all directions. "Sir, stop, sir. If you have something to say, let's talk it out." The brothel keeper mustered up her courage and came forward to mediate. Smashing things was a small matter, but if one side was really injured, it would be a big matter. Whether it was young Master Gao or this philanthropist Qian, they were both people that small people like her couldn't afford to offend. However, the procuress was also a woman without the strength to truss a chicken. She couldn't stop the fight, and when she shouted, the other party refused to listen. She could only anxiously stare. She watched as one of the legs of the chair was kicked off, and the porcelain on the table and the musical instruments thrown by the girls were overturned and stepped on back and forth. The procuress' heart was bleeding. Aya, what should we do?" "Everyone stop, quickly stop." Young Master Gao originally thought that victory was in his hands. After all, he brought 6 people with him. He knew the skills of those people. If it really didn't work, he could also fight it out himself. But who would have thought that this big man, who looked like an idiot, was actually very good at martial arts? With a left punch, he knocked the servant to the ground. The servant hugged his stomach and rolled on the ground, unable to get up. With a right punch, he went straight for the guard's face. Young Master Gao originally thought that the guard was very powerful, but in front of this person, he was like a slow fool. He just watched as the guard was punched. The bridge of his nose was broken, and his nose was bleeding all over his clothes. This person fought with the momentum of a group of people. In a few moves, he knocked down the people around young Master Gao. Young Master Gao was really angry. He rolled up his sleeves and picked up a chair, sneaking an attack from behind Zhao Wanjin. How could Zhao Wanjin, who licked blood on his blade, not notice this? He immediately turned sideways to avoid the attack, turned around, and kicked. Zhao Wanjin had measured the strength of this kick. It was not enough to kick someone to death, but it was very likely to cripple him. What's more, Zhao Wanjin hated evil as if it were his enemy. He couldn't stand this kind of ruffian who bullied women. When he kicked, his foot moved down a little and directly kicked this person's vital part. For a moment, young Master Gao was in so much pain that he couldn't speak. His face turned purple as he hugged his lower body, curled up, and rolled on the ground. In the blink of an eye, he let out a miserable howl like a pig being slaughtered. Ah! Everyone was scared out of their wits. The girls who were hiding under the tables and behind the cabinets were all dumbfounded. The brothel keeper slapped her thigh and shouted, "How can this be?" She hurriedly called for a doctor. Young Master Gao's 6 subordinates got up one by one with a bloody nose and a swollen face. When they saw the young master covering that part and rolling on the ground in pain, their souls almost flew away. Before the procuress could call a doctor, they immediately tore down a door panel, carried young Master Gao, and ran out. The room that was noisy for a while returned to silence. It was just that the procuress and the girls were already trembling with fear. The procuress didn't know what to say. She just thought that she didn't want to get involved in this matter. She wanted to reprimand philanthropist Chien, but when she thought of his big fist, she immediately became afraid. The procuress was helpless and hurried out with the girls. Chapter 678. Qin Yining nodded with an indifferent expression, as if he didn't care if Zhao Wanjin was crippled or killed. He stood up and brushed his sleeves, then took the cloak and draped it over his shoulders. He turned to Zhao Wanjin and said, "Let's go." "Yes." Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhua took the lead in answering. Yu Shifang's face was deathly pale, and she closed her eyes in despair. She hadn't succeeded in calling for help, but she didn't expect these people to beat up young Master Gao, and it looked like they had beaten him quite seriously. Librarian Gao doted on young Master Gao and obeyed him without any principles. If he knew that young Master Gao had come to Yi-Chui Pavilion to look for her, and that he had gotten into an argument because of her, needless to say, she and her sister didn't need to live anymore. Yu Shifang was so desperate that she didn't know what to do. At this moment, she couldn't even shed tears. Could it be that this was the fate of her and her sister? If they were really destined to go to this step, why didn't they let them go with their parents from the beginning? Instead, they left them to suffer all kinds of suffering in the world, with no one to help them. What did they do wrong? At this moment, Yu Shifang's mind was completely filled with despair. She didn't dare to have any hope for Qin Yining and his group. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, someone would lightly pat her shoulder? Yu Shifang turned around sluggishly and met a pair of gentle eyes. "You, what's wrong?" When Qin Yining saw Yu Shifang's lifeless appearance, he couldn't help but worry. "Aren't you coming with us to see the procuress and redeem your sister?" Yu Shifang was stunned. Her ears buzzed, and she didn't regain her senses for a long time. You mean, come with me?" Qin Yining smiled. "Don't tell me you want to stay here with your sister?" "No, of course not. But how could you? Believe me, I won't harm you." Qin Yining comforted her with a smile, as if he was comforting a frightened rabbit. Yu Shifang's dim eyes suddenly lit up. Although she didn't know who this person was, since she dared to say such words, it meant that she wasn't afraid of young Master Gao. After all, this was the old capital. What kind of officials and nobles weren't there? Perhaps she was a young miss from some family who had come out to play. Yu Shifang looked at Qin Yining expectantly, as if she was afraid that she would go back on her word. Qin Yining shook his head and nodded at Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhua. The two brothers immediately understood, and immediately sent for the procuress. The brothel keeper was sitting in the corner of the hall on the first floor, drinking hot tea and sulking. In this line of work, what they feared the most was to be involved in the disputes of high officials and nobles. If they were not careful, they might not be able to continue doing business. Today, a customer had beaten up the local tyrant's son. In the end, their restaurant might be the one to suffer. It was even possible that they would be ordered to close down. What sin have I committed? The brothel keeper sighed. She picked up her pipe and wanted to smoke, but in her frustration, she couldn't pack the tobacco properly. She was so angry that she threw the pipe to the side. There was still a commotion in the hall. Many people had seen the scene of everyone working together to lift the door plank to send young Master Gao to the hospital. At this moment, most of the people were discussing this matter. Zhao Wanjin went downstairs and found the brothel keeper in the corner. Seeing Zhao Wanjin's somewhat amiable face, the brothel keeper immediately recalled how this person had shown off his might upstairs. She couldn't help but tense up in fright. Her lips trembled as she asked in a trembling voice, "What's the matter?" "This." "Sir, what can I do for you?" "Follow me," Zhao Wanjin said, then turned around and walked up the wooden stairs. The brothel keeper was so nervous that she stood there in a daze for a long time. She thought about the consequences if she didn't follow him. Then, she hesitantly lifted the hem of her skirt, swayed her hips, and slowly walked up the stairs. When she arrived at the private room, she saw the mess on the floor. The brothel keeper was even more nervous. When she met the gaze of the handsome young master sitting in the middle, she didn't dare to look at him. She lowered her eyes and bowed. "Sir, if you need anything, please let me know." This person didn't look like a good person, but each way pavilion was full of women. He wouldn't make things difficult for women, right? Qin Yining put his arm around Yu Sifang's waist with a sullen face and let Yu Sifang sit next to him. Zhao Wanjin said, "Tell me, how much is the ransom for Miss Lame and her younger sister?" The brothel keeper looked at Zhao Wanjin. She had already imagined many guesses in her mind. She rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, sir, your eyes are really good." Giving a thumbs up, the brothel keeper boasted, "This Miss Lame and her younger sister were all taught by our Each-Way Pavilion with a lot of money. Miss Lame has grown up well and is a rich young lady. Her younger sister is just the right person. She is of the right age to teach. I really can't bear to let them go." This was the plan of having a glib tongue. She lowered the price. Zhao Wanjin sneered and grabbed the brothel keeper's neck. "You old thing, you're also not a good person. Looking at you, I'm afraid you've forced women into prostitution many times. Today, I'll kill you to get rid of evil for the people. Let's see if you're still sensible or not." The brothel keeper was so scared that her face turned pale. She grabbed Zhao Wanjin's sleeves with both hands and made a ha sound. She rolled her eyes and tried her best to say, I'll let them go. I am sensible. Zhao Wanjin flung her away and sneered, "It seems like you're not too stupid. Why haven't you brought Miss Lame's younger sister here yet?" Yes. The brothel keeper turned around and ordered the pimp who was hiding at the door and watching the show. The pimp was so scared that his calves were about to cramp. After receiving the order, he hurriedly went to find the person. Not long after, he brought back a beautiful little girl wearing a green satin jacket, with 2 red palace flowers in her hair. The little girl was only 8 years old. She was clearly frightened. After entering the door, she didn't even dare to raise her head. She was shivering in the corner and didn't notice her older sister at all. When Yu Sifang saw her younger sister like this, she sobbed and quickly went forward to hug her younger sister tightly. "It's okay. Don't be scared. It's okay." Yu Sirui was hugged by her older sister. After a long time, her eyes regained their clarity. She cried out in surprise and fear. She only knew how to call out to her older sister. When Qin Yining saw the two of them like this, a smile appeared on his face. Zhao Wanjin pushed the brothel keeper away and respectfully invited Qin Yining to go first. Qin Yining walked in front with a cold face. Zhao Wanjin, Zhao Yinuo, and the other brothers led Yu Sifang and her sister out. They didn't pay the money to redeem themselves and just took them away. However, the brothel keeper didn't dare to stop them. When they were far away, she finally dared to cry out loud, "Aya!" When the guests in the building heard this, they pushed open the window and shouted, "Who is it? Are you crying at a funeral?" As they spoke, they threw their teacups. The brothel keeper covered her mouth and didn't dare to cry anymore. The pimp and the other girls hurriedly smiled and apologized. Chapter 679. Outside Each-Way Pavilion, Qin Yining boarded the carriage and sat in the middle. Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinuo sat on either side of him. Zhao Yinuo retracted his gaze from Each-Way Pavilion's main entrance and sneered, "That librarian Gao seems to be used to acting like a tyrant." I didn't expect him to personally bring people here so soon. From the looks of it, it doesn't seem like he's here to capture someone, but to kill someone. He's the only heir in his family. With that kick of mine, I'm afraid that the Gao clan will have no descendants. It'd be strange if that Gao guy didn't go crazy. Big brother, you're really ruthless. The Alliance had only said to hit him harder, but you actually crippled him. Just looking at that kind of bastard makes me angry. If I don't cripple him now, he'll definitely harm others in the future. The two brothers looked at Qin Yining at the same time. In reality, they were also somewhat nervous. Qin Yining had indeed ordered them to make a big fuss today and teach that hedonistic young master a lesson. However, he didn't say that they would end his family line. After all, this kind of result could be said to be a devastating blow to any man. It would directly cause Librarian Gao's hatred for them to skyrocket. Seeing how nervous they were, Qin Yining laughed and said, "What's done is done. What's done is done. There's no point in thinking too much about it. Alliance head, I'm really sorry." Zhao Wanjin scratched his head and smiled honestly. If I hadn't been impulsive, things wouldn't have turned out this way. It's fine. Qin Yining said, young Master Gao deserved it. You didn't indiscriminately kill the innocent. Even if you beat him to death today, you'll only be enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. There'll be one less scum in the world. Moreover, you only crippled him. Regardless of whether we crippled him or not, Librarian Gao's anger will be enough for him to step into our trap. Zhao Wanjin sighed in relief when he heard Qin Yining's analysis. Qin Yining said, I've already told you the details of the plan. Things should develop according to our plan. You just need to act according to plan. Understood. Don't worry, Alliance head. I'll definitely handle this matter well. I won't leave any loopholes. That's good. From tomorrow onwards, the kanji factory would prepare some mixed grains and dry rations. The kanji would be cooked thicker, and some pickled vegetables would be prepared for distribution. If they can't eat salt for a long time, the people won't have any strength. Yes. Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinuo replied in unison. Zhao Wanjin smiled and said, with Alliance Head's arrangement, won't everyone be overjoyed eating? In all my life, I've never seen anyone give porridge with dried food and pickled vegetables. No matter what, it's a good thing. Qin Yining was actually very satisfied. Back when she was living in the mountains, she had hoped countless times that someone would come to Liang City to provide relief so that she wouldn't have to suffer so much. However, what he was looking forward to never happened. Now that she had the ability, and the output of the farm was not insufficient. If she followed the plan, she would be able to save her grandmother. Why not? Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinuo both laughed. The carriage traveled to Qin Manor for a while before Zhao Wanjin asked, Alliance Head, what do you plan to do with the two girls from the Yu family? Qin Yining said, since we've already saved them, we'll help them to the end. They look like flowers. If we send them out, they might be abducted again. That's why I plan to keep them in Qin Manor as servant girls. I don't know if they're willing. Alliance Head is very kind. Zhao Wanjin said, they've lived in each way pavilion before. Now that they can live openly, I'm sure they won't object to being servants. I hope so. Qin Yining also smiled. She no longer expected or asked others to do as she wished, so she didn't plan to force Yu Shifang. If they're not willing to be servants, I can only let them go. If they leave my side, who knows what kind of danger they'll encounter. At least they'll be safer if they stay by my side. Of course, it's not good for us to persuade them too much, lest someone misunderstands and thinks I'm a human trafficker. Wouldn't I be wrong then? Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinuo both laughed. By the time they returned to Qin Manor, it was already 7 in the evening. The night wind blew down with snowflakes, landing on the heads and shoulders of the group of people. It was so cold that Qin Yining couldn't help but shiver. She didn't go directly to see the two children, afraid that the coldness from her body would spread to them and cause them to fall ill. She simply asked the sisters, Yu Shifang and Yu Shirwei, to come forward and talk. Yu Sifang and Yu Sirui had already washed their faces and changed into green cotton short jackets and trousers of the same color prepared by the Fu for the servants. They also wore light pink long sleeves on the outside. When they saw Qin Yining, they knelt down gratefully and bowed. When Yu Shirwei saw her elder sister like this, she also respectfully bowed. Qin Yining smiled. Although she was still wearing men's clothing, her voice had already returned to its usual delicate and reserved tone. Rise. Don't be so courteous. Yu Shifang saw Qin Yining was wearing men's clothing and lazily leaning against the armrest of the chair. She didn't have any pretentious air. With this kind of otherworldly aura and the manner they were in right now, if she couldn't guess who Qin Yining was, then she would have lived in vain. Many thanks to Wang Fei for saving our lives. Yu Shifang pulled Yu Shirwei and bowed to Qin Yining again. Yu Shirwei didn't understand her elder sister's meaning. She paused for a moment before saying, Many thanks to Wang Fei for saving our lives. Qin Yining had Bing Tang and Ji Yun help the two up. Don't be so courteous. This was just something I did in passing. What plans do you have in the future? Qin Yining asked gently. Yu Shifang hadn't thought that Qin Yining wouldn't take credit for saving them. She felt even more emotional. She had already decided that Zhongshuan Qin Wang Fei was a kind person. She bit her lip and made up her mind to kneel down with a thump. Wang Fei. Today's matter has been blown up. Historian Gao already knows that the cause of the matter was me. If I go out, I'm afraid I will be caught before I reach the city gates. Wang Fei, you don't know, but 8 out of 10 people locked up in the prison of the old capital are innocent. Historian Gao will have people do bad things in secret. If I am caught, I'm afraid. I know that Wang Fei saved us sisters today and used so much money. You have already done your duty. But I still want to ask Wang Fei to protect us sisters. Yu Shifang immediately kowtowed to Qin Yining. Qin Yining waved his hand and indicated for Ji Yun to help the two up again. He said, I have 2 ways. One is for you to stay in my fu. This large fu doesn't have many women like you. Also, if you want to leave the old capital, I can give you some traveling expenses and escort you out of the city gates. I didn't bring you here to make you slaves or servants. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. However, I still want to remind you that young Master Gao is probably crippled this time. If you want to leave, you must go far away. You must not let Historian Gao's people find you. How could Yu Shifang not understand this logic? She originally wanted to seek refuge with Qin Yining. She was afraid that a noble family like him would look down on maidservants who came from an unorthodox background. Now that Qin Yining was willing to open his mouth, Yu Shifang couldn't be more happy. Many thanks, Wang Fei. Many thanks, Wang Fei. There is no one else in my family. It's just us sisters who depend on each other. Even if Wang Fei gives us traveling expenses and sends us away, if we meet a bad person outside, we won't be able to survive. We sisters will never forget Wang Fei's kindness in saving our lives. Even if we have to go through water and tread on fire, we will repay you. We are willing to be servants in Wang Fei's fu and obey your orders. We will never betray you. Yu Shifang pulled her younger sister and kowtowed 3 times to Qin Yining. Qin Yining then said, all right. You must not kowtow anymore. Since you've decided to stay, then stay. Today, follow Yu Yun to settle down. Tomorrow, Yuyun will arrange a leisurely job for you in the residence. You can also learn the rules of the academy while you're at it. Yes. Also, don't leave the Fu if you can. Otherwise, you will be caught by Historian Gao. Yes. This servant obeys. Qin Yining saw that the two sisters were a little tired, so he let Ji Yun take them away. After Ji Yun and the two maidservants walked far away, Bing Tang helped Qin Yining put on a cloak while serving her to the bedroom. He smiled and joked. Wang Fei went to take a stroll. Downstairs, he actually gained two beautiful maidservants. If Wang Yi knew, wouldn't he gasp in amazement? Talkative. Qin Yining pinched Bing Tang's cheeks. The two of them chatted and laughed as they first went to change clothes and wash up. Then, they went to accompany the two children. Just as Qin Fu was at peace, the Gao family in the middle of the night was already in chaos. Young Master Gao's family jewels were completely ruined this time. Librarian Gao even kidnapped an old imperial physician who lived in the old capital to treat young Master Gao's illness. The old imperial physician had no idea what to do, and young Master Gao had already fainted from a high fever. Historian Gao was so angry that the roots of his teeth itched. Did you find out? That old procuress did not deceive us. Replying to Master, the old procuress spoke the truth. The people who accompanied young Master and the women who were serving in the brothel at the time have all been asked. The person who injured young Master was indeed the one surnamed Xian who recently opened the kanji factory to distribute kanji. They said that it was because of a fight over a young lady named Lame. That surnamed Xian drank too much and fought with young Master. What a surnamed Xian! Historian Gao gritted his teeth. When he thought about how his son was a womanizer and was simply one of the best among the younger generation in the old capital, Historian Gao felt a wave of disappointment in his son's failure to live up to his expectations. But no matter what, he still had to save his son and take revenge. The next day, Zhao Wanjin and Qin Yining talked in low voices for a while. Qin Yining told Zhao Wanjin everything that needed to be told. Zhao Wanjin had a rough idea of what to do and ordered people to prepare the kanji factory. Today's kanji was especially thick. Even a pair of chopsticks could be casually thrown in. Everyone was also given a piece of mixed grain flatbread and a strip of pickled vegetables. The commoners had come early in the morning to line up. When they saw such good food, they all wolfed it down. They were so moved that their eyes brimmed with tears. They repeatedly said that philanthropist Qian was the kindest person in the world. Chapter 680. Arrest, thank you, philanthropist Qian. We can't even remember how long it has been since we ate so much. Philanthropist Qian is truly the reincarnation of Bodhisattva. In the future, I will definitely set up a long life memorial tablet for you and pray that you will be safe and sound. The commoners who received the food were all moved to tears as they spoke words of gratitude and Ji Xiang. Zhao Wanjin had been appearing at the kanji factory every day for the past few days, so he was already familiar with the commoners. As he served the kanji, he spoke words of comfort. However, the commoners were too enthusiastic. Some elders, women, and children even knelt down and kowtowed to him. With someone taking the lead, the commoners who were filled with gratitude but did not know how to express it all knelt down one after another. Some bowed, some kowtowed. Everyone was grateful to Zhao Wanjin. Zhao Wanjin's heart surged. He walked around the big pot and helped up a few elders who were closer to him. He then instructed everyone, quickly get up, quickly get up. There are still elders among you, so don't make me feel bad. I am a straightforward person, and my temper is also straightforward. My family is not particularly rich and can only be considered a small amount. I am also passing by here to do business. What I can't stand the most is other people's suffering. After the disaster, everyone still has not eaten their fill. There are even children and elders who have starved to death on the streets. Do you think I can stand by and watch? The imperial court is currently resisting the invasion of the Titan in the north. It is a tense time, so it is normal for them to not be able to take care of it. Since I can still afford it, I naturally have to shoulder it. Zhao Wanjin bowed as he spoke. The commoners were moved to tears as they said in an uproar, "Thank you, philanthropist Qian." Zhao Wanjin seemed to be embarrassed by everyone's praise. He scratched his head and said, "I can't afford to treat everyone to good food, so I can only give you the simplest food. Even if the taste isn't good, I can at least fill you up. Everyone, don't be polite and eat while it is hot." "Thank you, philanthropist." "Philanthropist, you are too kind." The pancakes in their hands were still warm. When they took a bite, the soft texture and the unique aroma of grains immediately filled their mouths. The more they chewed, the more fragrant it became. There was also a hint of sweetness in the aroma of the grains. At this time, when they took a bite of the salted vegetables and a mouthful of the porridge, the warmth really spread from their stomachs to their whole body in the cold winter. For a moment, there were 1,000 people in the square, but only one sound could be heard. That was the sound of chewing and slurping when eating porridge. When Qin Yining saw that Zhao Wanjin's words had moved the commoners, he felt happy as well. Even if the reason she gave out the porridge was to save her grandmother, Qin Yining felt unprecedentedly satisfied that she could help so many people survive the cold and hungry winter. At this moment, a burst of noise suddenly came from the direction of the main street behind the crowd of commoners. They could vaguely hear curses and the exclamations of the commoners when they were pushed aside. Qin Yining, who was hiding in the carriage, narrowed her eyes and lifted the curtain to look outside. When she saw who it was, she knew that her plan had succeeded. Zhao Wanjin also saw who it was. He saw that the leader was a thin man with a dark face. The skin on his face was sagging, and the wrinkles on his eyebrows and the deep wrinkles under his eyes made his already unfriendly face look even more gloomy. Looking at the way he was dressed and the dozen or so local bailiffs behind him, it was clear that he was Historian Gao. Historian Gao led the crowd forward. When he encountered the commoners who did not react in time, he naturally did not have the patience to remind them. Historian Gao's subordinates immediately slapped them and pushed them away without hesitation. There were even some old people who walked slowly who were kicked mercilessly. Zhao Wanjin calmly smiled and stood in place waiting for Historian Gao with his hands by his side. Historian Gao led the dozen or so subordinates and separated the crowd as they headed straight for Zhao Wanjin. The commoners who were holding the porridge bowls and dried food all stopped eating and looked in confusion at Historian Gao and his subordinates. They did not know why these people would suddenly come to the porridge factory. The locals all knew how powerful Historian Gao and his subordinates were. They did not think that these people had good intentions. Usually, even if they starved to death, they would not see Historian Gao blink. Today, it must not be a good thing. Just when the scene was silent, Zhao Wanjin smiled and cupped his hands at Historian Gao. "Officer, Before he finished speaking, he was met with a loud slap, which directly slapped Zhao Wanjin's face to the side. Zhao Wanjin was shocked. He covered his face and looked at Historian Gao. Why did you hit me?" Historian Gao's eyes were red. He gritted his teeth and did not say a word. He raised his hand and slapped him again. Zhao Wanjin and Qin Yining had privately studied Historian Gao's reaction, so he was prepared to go all out and suffer some superficial wounds. He was secretly determined to teach this grandson a lesson in the future. At this time, he only pretended to be afraid and screamed in horror, "What are you doing? What right do you have to hit me?" Without another word, Librarian Gao continuously slapped Zhao Wanjin's face several times. In the end, he still couldn't vent his anger and kicked Xiao Wanjin's stomach, sending him flying into the crowd. Tie him up and take him away. Yes. As soon as Historian Gao gave the order, his subordinates immediately did as they were told. At this time, the commoners had already recovered from their shock. They saw that the great benefactor who had given them food to eat was slapped in the face for no reason and kicked to the ground, unable to get up for a long time. Everyone was already beyond angry. Even if they knew what kind of person Historian Gao was, at this moment, the commoners who were full of anger were not afraid at all and shouted loudly. What right do you have to hit him? What did Philanthropist Chen do wrong? Why did you hit him? Why did you catch him? We are hungry and cold. We won't be able to survive this winter. I don't see any officials coming to help us. We finally found a philanthropist who gave us food, but the officials came out to hit him. What kind of logic is this? The discontent of over 1,000 people turned into curses and voices of injustice. One could see just how noisy it was. Dark clouds covered the old capital. In this empty square, one could even hear the echoes of the people's curses. Historian Gao's heart was filled with thoughts of his crippled son. At this time, he only wanted Qian Gui to taste the same pain. How could he care about what the commoners thought? Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. The deafening curses were nothing to Dianshi Gao. He walked quickly, and the constables and attendants behind him did not dare to delay. Some of them held down the unconscious Xiao Wanjin, while others went in front of Dianshi Gao to open a path, pushing the agitated crowd away. When the commoners saw this scene, they finally could not control themselves. They did not care about the food in their hands. People pushed against each other, and people rushed in Historian Gao's direction. After these days of giving out porridge, the number of people who heard the news had increased. There were over 1,000 commoners gathered in this small square. How could Historian Gao and the dozen or so bailiffs fight against the crowd? Before they could leave with the unconscious culprit, they had already almost been pushed over. In a moment of desperation, Dianshi Gao unsheathed his saber with a clang. The gleaming silver blade was so dazzling under the pale winter sun that it made people squint their eyes. Who dares to move? I want to see who dares to move. With Historian Gao taking the lead, his subordinates also pulled out their swords and pointed them at the commoners who were about to rush forward. With the cold blades pointed at them, the commoners in front did not dare to move forward. The people behind did not dare to push, for fear of harming other people's lives. There were commoners who loudly shouted, "Don't push, don't push. They've pulled out their swords." The words "pull out their swords" made the crowd even angrier. Their angry roars were mixed in with the light snow that suddenly blew up. What right do you have to arrest people? What crime did Philanthropist Chen commit? Speak clearly. If there is no evidence, we will not let Philanthropist Chen leave here. The commoners were filled with righteous indignation and had already become a chaotic mess. Historian Gao gave a cold smile and used his sword to gesture around. If you want to ask, then I'll tell you. This person is a wanted criminal by the imperial court and he killed someone. We are here on orders to arrest the criminal and interrogate him. You are blocking our way here. Could it be that you are his accomplices? Impossible. How could Philanthropist Chen kill people? He gives us food and clothes to eat and clothes to wear. He treats us better than our own parents, so how could he kill people? There must be a problem here. Philanthropist Chen would not kill people. Historian Gao gave a cold smile. Won't kill people. Could it be that a murderer would carve words on his forehead? This official is here on orders, so don't try to cause trouble. Otherwise, you will all be treated as accomplices and be beheaded. The commoners were shocked by Historian Gao's words. Since ancient times, the common people did not fight with the officials. These common people were used to being bullied. It was already the limit for them to stand up for philanthropist Qian De out of loyalty. Now, the officials said that they would be beheaded as accomplices. These words really scared them. No one dared to say anything because they were afraid of being caught and killed. But the anger in their eyes was real. Historian Gao gave a cold snort and pushed aside the people blocking his way. He waved his sword like he was driving away mosquitoes, driving away the commoners blocking his way. His subordinates also followed suit. The commoners were intimidated by the sword and no one dared to use their own flesh and blood to block the sword. They could not win in words or fight, so they could only watch as Historian Gao took away the unconscious philanthropist Qian. Historian Gao and his group of 10 people disappeared from sight. For a long time, no one said anything. Chapter 681. Qin Yining's brows were tightly furrowed as she looked worriedly in the direction that Historian Gao and the others had left. When she and Zhao Wanjin decided on the plan, she knew that Historian Gao would not be kind when he saw Zhao Wanjin. A few slaps and kicks would be light. She was afraid that there would be more torture waiting for Zhao Wanjin in the future. She felt a bit guilty and couldn't bear it, but Zhao Wanjin patted his chest and said, "I hate these cruel officials who prey on the people the most. To be able to take down these people and get the old alliance head out, I'll only get some superficial wounds. This is a good deal. Alliance head doesn't know my internal martial arts. When I use it, they won't be able to hurt me. Alliance head, don't worry." Qin Yining was still worried, but when she hesitated, Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhuo both promised her. Qin Yining saw that Zhao Yinhuo was even more certain than Zhao Wanjin and believed her. But now that Zhao Wanjin had been taken away, she was still worried. "Bing Tang, go back and prepare the medicine. We'll send it in at any time." Bing Tang nodded and pulled Qin Yining's cloak tighter around her arm. "Wang Fei, don't worry. I've already done everything according to your orders." "That's good." Qin Yining finally relaxed a bit. At this time, the people in the square came back to their senses and were in an uproar. These cruel officials of the old capital had never cared about their lives. Every time the imperial court gave out aid, it would first fill the pockets of these scum. Now, a kind person had finally come and was willing to buy food and clothes for these people who didn't even know them. Many people had been pulled back from the brink of starvation or freezing to death. Zhao Wanjin was their second parent. Seeing such a good person being treated like this, who knew how much hardship he would have to suffer in the yamen? How could the people sit still? Everyone was shouting and cursing the cruel and corrupt officials. Zhao Yinhuo stood in Zhao Wanjin's position with a bitter face. "Fellow villagers, elders, please listen to me." Everyone was silent and looked in front of them in confusion. Zhao Yinhuo rubbed her reddened eyes and said loudly, "I am the head shopkeeper of Boss Qian's family. Everyone has seen the current situation. Our boss has been captured, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. If we can't bring him back safe and sound, I won't have the face to see my family's old master. Therefore, this kanji factory probably did not have the energy to continue operating. Everyone, hurry up and eat while it's still hot. Let's disperse early." When everyone heard this, the disappointment in their eyes could hardly be concealed. No matter who it was, when they saw a glimmer of hope for survival and were suddenly told that they would not continue to help them in the future, their negative emotions would surge. However, after seeing how philanthropist Qian was taken away with their own eyes, it was hard for them to resent the person who spoke. Philanthropist Qian was arrested, and there was no one in charge of the family. The servants were busy trying to use their connections to save the master. It was understandable that they had no time and energy to take care of the porridge factory. If there was someone to blame, it was the cruel official who took away philanthropist Qian. The thick porridge in the bowls and the dry rations in the hands of the commoners were already cold. They were all stunned on the spot, not knowing what to do. After eating today's meal, would they have no hope tomorrow? They originally had a glimmer of hope that they could survive this harsh winter. However, once philanthropist Qian was arrested, where could they find such a kind-hearted and wealthy person? Their hope of survival had been easily taken away by librarian Gao. Low sobbing sounds came from the crowd. Some of the old, weak women and children did not dare to eat the porridge and dry rations. They planned to save it for when they were really hungry tomorrow. They did not know how they would survive in the future. As for the younger ones, they were extremely angry. Good people don't have good karma. What kind of fucking logic is this? Heavens, don't you have eyes? Corrupt official historian Gao, it's all historian Gao's fault. The public square was like a pot of boiling oil. Waves of angry curses came one after another. They had nowhere to vent their fear of the future and their resentment of being deprived of food. They could only vent some of their anger by shouting. This historian Gao has never done anything good in the city. His son is even worse. It's obvious. This group of cruel officials eat the government's rice, but they are not willing to redress the grievances of the commoners. Instead, they are making us suffer. To put it bluntly, what are our little lives in the eyes of this group of cruel officials? Isn't killing a few or dozens of people just a matter of moving their mouths? Heavens, this is heavens wanting to cut off our path of survival. Angry curses and sorrowful cries mixed together. The entire public square was filled with anger. After the porridge and dry rations were distributed, the commoners did not immediately leave. They still stayed where they were. Those who were familiar with each other gathered together to discuss how to save philanthropist Qian. Qin Yining put down the warm curtains of the carriage and sighed softly. Let's set off for home. Yes. Bing Tang and Ji Yun gave the order. The coachman received the order and the carriage slowly moved. The wooden wheels rolled across the street paved with green bricks. The carriage shook rhythmically as it passed through the cracks between the bricks. The lifelike gold-threaded butterfly on Qin Yining's hairpin with an eastern pearl flower sways gently as well. They did not speak on the way back. When they returned to the prince's mansion, Master Zhong rushed over to ask Qin Yining, "Boss, what should we do next?" Qin Yining thought of the refugees in the public square and frowned. How are they now? The crowd in the public square has not dispersed yet. Everyone is angry. They are probably discussing whether to go to historian Gao's house to plead for leniency. Some even said that they would go to the Yamen to plead for the magistrate to release them. Magistrate Yang was in charge of the old capital and was in charge of the surrounding towns. Qin Yining frowned slightly. They are willing to risk their lives as commoners and have the guts to plead for leniency for Zhao Wanjin. This shows how important Zhao Wanjin is to the commoners. That's right. Shopkeeper Zhong also sighed. The weather has been cold and the old capital has been experiencing disasters for many years. The commoners have already suffered greatly. If it weren't for this offering of porridge, I'm afraid many commoners wouldn't have survived this winter. That is why Zhao Wanjin is revered by them like a living immortal. That is why the commoners do not have high expectations. Qin Yining sighed and shook his head. Although I want the current situation, I cannot bear to see everyone starve or freeze to death. Master Zhong's expression changed as he asked, Wang Fei, do you mean to continue giving out porridge? Yes. Qin Yining nodded. He narrowed his eyes and thought carefully about how to deal with the current situation. Shopkeeper Zhong said anxiously, but wasn't this scene also arranged by the princess consort? Now that we are giving out porridge again, won't the commoners' anger be reduced? That will do us no good. Princess consort, please think twice before you act. Chapter 682. Master Zhong was startled by Qin Yining's question. He furrowed his brow thoughtfully. Qin Yining continued, "The time is not right yet. Small fights won't have much of an effect on the Gao person. Once this kind of person recovers, I'm afraid he will retaliate against the common people. If that's the case, it's better to stabilize the common people and wait for the right time to carry out the next step of the plan." Master Zhong thought for a moment and then slowly nodded in realization. "I understand Wang Fei's meaning. I was thinking too simply just now. I didn't consider the consequences of the common people making a ruckus at this time." Qin Yining smiled and comforted Master Zhong. He then sighed and said, "Natural and man-made disasters, the ones who suffer the most are these common people. If we continue to give out kanji, at least it will increase everyone's chances of survival." Yes. Wang Fei is a benevolent person. No matter if it was when you went bankrupt to save so many people during the drought or when you used your own money to help Wang Yi save the people during the earthquake, everything you have done has always been done with a clear conscience. I have always admired this. You are too serious. I am a woman, and in this kind of situation, what I can do is limited. The present situation is like this. In the future, there may be many times when I will not be able to act freely. It is already very good to be able to do something for the common people within the limits of my ability. The two discussed some follow-up matters. Master Zhong hurriedly went to arrange the kanji factory with Zhao Yinhuo. He planned to find a new face to continue giving out kanji. Qin Yining returned to the room to play with the two children for a while. Xian Yun lifted the curtain and entered the room. Seeing Zhao Gu and Han Gu awake, she said in a soft voice, "Wang Fei, Jingzhe has returned." Qin Yining immediately stood and handed Han Gu, who was in his arms, to the wet nurse. She had arranged for Jingzhe to secretly investigate the situation in the military camp. Pang Zhao's letter to him contained only good news and not bad news. She was afraid that Pang Zhao was in danger but did not want her to know. She walked briskly to the main room of the snow pear courtyard. Jingzhe had been waiting for a long time with his head bowed. When he saw Qin Yining, he said, "Wang Fei, the army seems to be in a state of disunity, but the central part of the camp is heavily guarded. Wang Yi must have made arrangements. Our men were afraid of alerting the enemy, so they didn't dare to get too close. As a result, we didn't get much information about Wang Yi. We only saw Wang Yi training his troops. But Deng Minchang's situation is very obvious." This was also within Qin Yining's expectations. If Pang Zhao's commander-in-chief's camp could allow people to gather information at will, after so many years of war, wouldn't he have been skinned alive? Then let's talk about Deng Minchang. Yes. Jingzhe clasped his hands and bowed. Then he said in a low voice, "Deng Minchang doesn't do anything serious in the army. He is constantly drinking and having beautiful women to serve him. Normally, he is rarely seen training with the soldiers. Wang Yi also doesn't have any intention of strictly disciplining him. This kind of person can become a general." Even though Li Qitian was on the opposite side of them, Qin Yining believed in Li Qitian's intelligence and ability to use people. If Deng Minchang had been this kind of idiot from the beginning, he probably wouldn't have been able to sit in the position of general. Qin Yining unconsciously played with the long hair that fell over his shoulder. His thoughts were all on this unusual situation. But thinking back to what he had seen and heard in the past few days, Qin Yining had a rough idea of what was going on. Even though the sky was high and the emperor was far away, the situation here was no less chaotic than in Beijing. This was the old capital of the Yan dynasty. Not to mention whether the officials were loyal to Dezhou or Dian, not to mention the distance, the merchants and wealthy families all had their own plans. If Deng Minchang was a tough and principled person like Pang Zhao, whether he was a local official or a tyrant, he was afraid that there would be times when he did things inappropriately. But if a person's temperament was raised the right way, then when he wanted to do something, he would be able to cater to his liking. What's more, they could even let women talk to him about it. Even if it wasn't for the sake of smoothing out relationships, just having a guard full of flaws would be beneficial to the supporters of the Yen dynasty who were loyal to the Yuchi Yen. Therefore, Qin Yining felt that it wasn't Li Qitian who chose an unreliable person to be the guard. Instead, it was someone who deliberately led the originally outstanding but weak-willed Deng Mincheng onto the wrong path. It seems like Wang Ye's situation in the military isn't easy to handle. As the saying goes, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. If Deng Mincheng is this kind of person, then the soldiers he brought up won't be any better. That's right. Wang Yi might still be busy in the military, Jing Zhi said. Qin Yining asked, are the soldiers still respectful to Wang Yi? Do they still listen to orders and prohibitions? When I went there, it seemed like Wang Yi was handling things with ease. But it's definitely not easy to make all the generals in the military yield. Deng Mincheng alone was not enough to represent all the generals in the army. At this time, Qin Yining was extremely glad that he didn't tell Pang Xiao about the mess in his family. Li Qitian didn't have good intentions. If he arranged for Pang Xiao to be in this kind of place, then the situation in the military must have been brewing for a long time. If the general managed things well, then outsiders would see them as glorious, and Li Qitian wouldn't have any reason to blame them. But if they didn't manage things well, then they would have to give up the title of war god Wang Yi. Not to mention Pang Xiao, even a woman like her would feel embarrassed for Pang Xiao. Wang Fei. Wang Ye's letter has arrived. Xian Yun held a thick envelope with both hands. Qin Yining suddenly stood up in surprise. He took the envelope and looked at Pang Xiao's bold and unrestrained handwriting. Qin Yining smiled from the bottom of his heart. The contents of this letter were the same as the ones he wrote to her in the past. It was all about asking about her well-being, asking about the situation at home and the children's situation. It didn't mention a single word about the difficulties and chaos in the military. He definitely wouldn't write about the information that Jing Zhi found out. Looking at the mushy, "I miss you very much," at the bottom of the letter, Qin Yining's face turned red. He sat down at the black lacquered wooden table with a smile. He slowly ground the ink and thought about the contents of the letter. But when she finished writing the letter, she found that what she did was no different from what Pang Xiao did. Pang Xiao didn't tell her about the matters in the military, and she didn't tell Pang Xiao about the troubles around her. The two of them only reported the good news and not the bad news. They both hid the unpleasant content and left the happy content. Qin Yining shook his head and laughed. It seemed that Pang Xiao wasn't completely unconcerned about the outside world. He must have heard about the matters in the city. She didn't say anything in the letter. She didn't know if Pang Xiao would be angry if he knew. By the time Pang Xiao received the letter, the sky had already darkened. He brought the letter close to the silk lamp and carefully read it back and forth 3 times. Only then did he chuckle as he folded the letter and kept it close to his body. He then told Huzi, "Take a few clever people and disguise yourselves as commoners. Go into the city and find out if there are any major events happening in the city these days." Chapter 683. Huzi scratched his head and giggled as he said, "Wasn't it Ye's orders?" Something like, "In the future, seeing Wang Fei is like seeing this king. We cannot be disrespectful to Wang Fei and cannot be disloyal. You yourself said that we cannot be disloyal to Wang Fei. How can we reveal Wang Fei's matters to Wang Yi?" "Ha, you still have reason." Pang Xiao laughed as he scolded. But when he thought about it, it did make sense. He had given a death order. Jinghu Wei, who was protecting Qin Yining, had to treat her as their master. If the brothers said whatever he asked, Pang Shao might doubt their loyalty. Forget it. I don't have to pry into the matters around Sister Yi. I just don't feel at ease. Pang Shao lifted his robe and sat down on the official's hat placed at the head of the tent. When he thought of Qin Yining, he couldn't suppress the smile on his lips. She has a strong personality and is smart. Her analysis and grasp of the political situation is sometimes better than mine. I'm afraid that she will deliberately hide something and not say it. Huzi smiled and said, "Isn't Wang Yi the same? You didn't tell Wang Fei about your matters. You brat, who are you siding with?" Pang Shao scolded with a smile. Huzi was not afraid at all. Ever since Wang Yi had Wang Fei in his heart, Wang Yi had become more and more human. He was not as lazy to speak as before and would occasionally chat with him. He was not as depressed as Mr. Zheng, who had returned to his hometown. He did not want Wang Yi to carry the past and pass his days in pain. He hoped that Wang Yi could live like a person and not be bound by those matters all day long. "Wang Yi, I will go and find out the news now." "Go." Pang Shao used the time when Huzi took people to find out the news to spread out the map of the southeast on the table. He held a silk lamp and looked at it closely. In his mind, he was analyzing the situation in the south and what the Yuqi Yan might do. Gu Shixiang was not a good person. He was so old, but his brain still kept up. In addition to his ambition, if it was not handled properly, Dian and Dezhou would definitely fight. If he had the Tiger Army, what was there to worry about? But the army in his hands was like a plate of loose sand. If he wanted to train soldiers, it would take time. He was afraid that while he was preparing, Yuqi Yan would catch him off guard. Although Pang Shao had never said anything, he was well aware of his current situation. The soldiers under his command were not the hardcore army he had trained a long time ago, and he did not have a good reputation in Great Yen. Perhaps, the common people were afraid of him, or even hated him. Whether it was in the army or among the people, he did not have a firm foothold. He did not have a strong support behind his back. Li Qitian was the person who should support him the most, but he did not know when he would stab him in the back. After thinking about it, it was not so easy to deal with. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed, and it was already late at night when everyone was quiet. Huzi brought back the news from the city. The master and servant were silent for a moment. After a quarter of an hour, Huzi sighed with admiration. "Wang Fei is so capable. She is better than other women. Even when I am not by her side, she is still stirring up the wind and rain. She has mixed up the old." Pang Shao glanced at Huzi and generously gave him a knock on the head. Was this a compliment? So it was Duchess Ding who was locked up. That's why these things happened. Pang Shao was so smart that he understood Qin Yining's intention after thinking about it. He could not help but sigh with emotion for her courage and insight. As you said, Sister Yi is really capable. She is better than other women. Huzi rubbed his forehead and nodded repeatedly. Wasn't that the case? How many women could make all the poor people in the old capital hate historian Gao? The resentment of the people was so great that it almost turned into a substance. Even the magistrate, who had been staying in a corner and keeping a neutral position since he came to the old capital, began to notice it. But Wang Fei is too much. She has already made a big fuss. Isn't it better to let everyone rush to historian Gao's house and force him to let them go? That's too simple and crude. Pang Shao shook his head. She is worried that the people will be implicated. She is also afraid that the people's anger will not be enough to make historian Gao suffer a big loss. I think she went to Yi-Chui Pavilion to pick up Miss Yu and her sister. Yes. Miss Yu and her sister are now working in Qin's mansion. When Huzi talked about Qin Yining's work, his face was full of admiration and emotion. Pang Xiao temporarily stopped praising Qin Yining. He tapped the table with his index finger and pondered. This might be a good opportunity for him to gain a firm foothold. Send someone to pay close attention to Wang Fei's situation. On the one hand, we can't lose the opportunity. If there are any changes, tell me at any time. On the other hand, the most important thing is to protect Wang Fei's safety. Seeing Pang Xiao's serious expression, Huzi immediately nodded and said seriously, Wang Yi, don't worry. I'll do it right away. The cold night passed. When the sky gradually brightened, even a breath could make a layer of frost hang on one's cheeks. The poor people came out of their shacks and dilapidated temples. They quickly walked to the square where the porridge factory was located with their hands in their sleeves and their waists bent. If we run like this, we can warm up a bit. It's all thanks to philanthropist Qian. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the strength to run. I wonder how philanthropist Qian is now. Will he be tortured? It's hard to say. Don't we all know what kind of person historian Gao is? There were many people discussing the same topic along the way. No one was optimistic about the consequences of this matter, so they were all in low spirits. But when they arrived at the porridge factory, they saw that there was only a wooden awning left in the empty square. Inside, there was only a stove made of stone. There was no more thick porridge that gave off the aroma of food and white mist. Everyone's low spirits completely turned into resentment and anger. As expected, the porridge factory was closed. Shopkeeper Qian's family was busy using their connections to save people. They, who were in a precarious situation, were once again cold and hungry, and could lose their lives at any time. The number of people who came increased. At first, everyone was confused and helpless. But after a moment, when everyone remembered who the culprit behind all this was, everyone became angry. It was one thing to hear the news yesterday. It was another thing to actually have no food to eat today. The people were already suffering. Now, their suffering turned into resentment. All of their anger was directed at historian Gao and the local officials who did nothing. What do we do? How do we survive this winter? What kind of world is this? It's so easy for someone to be willing to care about our lives. But the government keeps saying that he's a murderer. It's not the first time the government has done this. I heard that there was a Madame Zhang who wanted to set up a porridge factory and a nursery. However, because the amount of money she gave to librarian Gao was too little, she was arrested and thrown into prison. She hasn't been released yet. No one knows if she's dead or alive. In the crowd, someone casually mentioned this matter. Chapter 684. The winter in the south was cold and damp. Layers of dark clouds hung overhead. The wind and frost cut the thinly clothed commoners, causing them to shrink their necks in the cold. It's almost New Year's Eve. Those wealthy families are gathered together to eat and drink. What about us? I'm afraid we won't survive this winter. One person lamented, causing everyone around him to wipe away their tears. Yesterday, they still had some hope for their future. Even if they lived casually, at least they could eat a mouthful of hot food every day, so they wouldn't starve to death. Moreover, after eating their fill, they seemed to be more resistant to the cold. But now, the porridge stall was empty. Their hope of living had been taken away. It's all librarian Gao's fault. It's all those corrupt officials' fault. They don't treat us as humans at all. Why would they care if we live or die? I still have my mother at home. Without philanthropist Qian's porridge, what will happen to my mother? The helpless commoners wiped away their tears, but the hot tears turned cold in the cold wind. There were also those with bigger tempers who were already beyond angry. Let's go find librarian Gao. Yes, Librarian Gao must release the philanthropist who did good deeds. I didn't see him deal with the evildoers, but he's so thick-skinned as to arrest the good people who did good deeds. Does he want us to die? Let's go together. The angry crowd was boiling. Some wanted to go to Librarian Gao's residence to ask for clarification, but there were also some who were afraid of Librarian Gao and didn't dare to go. Some people shrank back in fear because they knew how powerful Librarian Gao was. But everyone else was going to Gao's residence. If they didn't go, what if others got benefits and they didn't get it? However, the crowd only hesitated for a moment because most people were too angry to think. The crowd pushed and shoved in the direction of Librarian Gao's residence. However, at this moment, the sound of horse hooves and wheels rolling came from the direction of the main street from the square. Some commoners nearby turned around and saw a few ox carts. The carts were filled with firewood, food, cooking utensils, and other items. The person following the carts shouted, "We're here to give porridge. Everyone, don't rush. Don't push. Wait a moment." This person's voice wasn't loud, but when someone said that they were going to give out porridge, such a big piece of news still spread far and wide. The people who were closer to them stopped in their tracks and looked at the ox carts doubtfully. They watched as the servants dressed in khaki-colored robes went to the porridge stall and used the stove that had been built to start a fire. There were also people who washed the pots and washed the rice. Although it was coarse rice, the sound of the rice being poured into the pot was so beautiful that everyone could not help but swallow their saliva. Everyone's stomach was filled with anger. Most of them had already made up their minds to get Librarian Gao to give them an explanation. However, the boiling anger could not be vented at this moment because of hunger. If they walked away, they didn't know if the person giving out the porridge this time was a daily occurrence. They also didn't know when they would have the chance to eat their fill again. Let's go back. Let's eat first. That's right. We have to survive first before we can think about other things. Everyone comforted each other and went back to the square to wait for the porridge to start. However, the anger in everyone's hearts would not be extinguished just because they had food to eat. They would only become angrier and secretly blame themselves. After all, they were all selfish and could not risk it all for philanthropist Qian. The pot was steaming and the fragrance of the rice gradually spread out. Everyone took their bowls and lined up to get the porridge. However, the porridge this time was much thinner than philanthropist Qian's porridge. When the workers helped to scoop the porridge, a steward explained, "Our family's young master's family has limited resources. They are not as rich as philanthropist Qian's family. If everyone were to eat the thick porridge, the rations would not last long before they ran out. Everyone, please don't be offended. It is important to make do and survive. Please forgive us, please forgive us." The steward was in his early 30s and looked very honest. Everyone believed what he said. A commoner said, "Your family is doing a good deed to let us survive this winter. How can we be offended? That's right. Your family's young master is a very good person. May I ask his name?" The steward waved his hand and said with a smile, "Young master has instructed that we are not to speak of his name. Everyone, just focus on eating the porridge." The commoners did not ask for the other party's name, but they were still very grateful. However, when they thought of the thick porridge, dry rations, and salted vegetables that philanthropist Qian gave them, and then looked at this bowl of thin porridge, everyone could more or less compare. They did not hate the person who gave the porridge. They hated Dianshi Gao. If Dianshi Gao did not make trouble for no reason, they would still have dry rations to eat. They would not be in such a state where they did not even dare to finish the thin porridge in one go. They were afraid that after eating this meal, no one would come to give them porridge the next day. No one would care about them. Qin Yining sat in the carriage and looked at the commoners in ragged clothes in the square. He felt indescribably sad. He put down the curtain and turned to Master Zhong and said, "Our financial resources are enough. We have to help them survive this winter no matter what. We cannot stop giving the porridge. We have to persist until spring comes and everything recovers and they can find another way to survive." Master Zhong nodded and said, "Don't worry. Even though there was a disaster this year, our food supplies this porridge factory. If we use it sparingly, we can still survive. Even if we can't make thick porridge, we can still use thin porridge. It's fine as long as everyone can survive." "That's what I mean." Qin Yining nodded and said, "I have always been at ease with Master Zhong's work." Master Zhong cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Wang Fei is too kind. However, I am also a bit worried. Everyone can eat their fill and wear warm clothes. What if their resentment towards Jianshi Gao disappears bit by bit? What should we do then?" Qin Yining smiled. "Originally, we had the opportunity to eat dry rations, but now we can only eat thin porridge because of Jianshi Gao. Who wouldn't hate him? But whether it is dry rations or thin porridge, they did not get it themselves. That's human nature." Qin Yining said, "It's human nature to be greedy. I'm not belittling anyone. It's just that they already had a chance to get something better, but they were stopped by someone else. People who are angry will only remember this and won't think so much." Master Zhong nodded thoughtfully. He had a new understanding of Qin Yining's ability to analyze people's minds. In the next few days, the porridge factory gave out porridge on time. Even though it was only thin porridge, it was a life-saving food for many of the refugees. Even though everyone could not eat their fill, at least they would not starve to death. They were all grateful to the new, great philanthropist. However, everyone's hatred towards Jianshi Gao did not decrease at all, just as Qin Yining had predicted. Chapter 685. Qin Yining hugged Han Gu and Bing Tang hugged Zhao Gu. The two of them walked in circles in the warm room with the charcoal brazier burning. Bing Tang coaxed Zhao Gu, who was blinking and looking around. She asked in a low voice, "It's almost the new year. I don't know if Wang Yi will be able to come back and reunite with you." Qin Yining smiled helplessly. "Wang Yi is tied up with military affairs. There is nothing to be done about it. It's fine if he doesn't come back for the new year. As long as he is safe in the military camp, it doesn't matter even if we are separated for a short time. Wang Fei is really open-minded. If it were anyone else, young couples who rarely spend time together would probably be anxious, afraid that there would be some animosity between the two of them. You, on the other hand, are not anxious at all. There is no use in being anxious." Qin Yining smiled and kissed Han Gu in his arms. He coaxed the child into giggling. It was so cute that one's heart would soften. "The court is tense right now. How can I ask Wang Yi to take care of outside matters and have enough time to stay at home with me? Also, Wang Yi is not a womanizer. I know that he won't attract women. What is there to be anxious about?" Bing Tang couldn't help but smile. Wang Fei and Wang Yi understand each other, trust each other, and love each other. This kind of relationship is enviable. Bing Tang still had not told her that Pang Xiao would rather not have children in order to not let Qin Yining suffer. She had seen the relationship between Qin Yining and Pang Xiao with her own eyes. She had seen them go through trials and hardships together. Even now, they were silently sacrificing for each other. Qin Yining did not want to cause trouble for Pang Xiao. He did not tell Pang Xiao that his grandmother had been arrested. He used schemes to solve it himself. If they could have such a good person, they would not feel pity even if they sacrificed their lives for each other. She coaxed the two children to sleep just as Master Zhong came back from outside. Qin Yining went to the front hall to meet Master Zhong. "How's Lu Dehan doing?" Qin Yining asked with a smile. Lu Dehan was one of the victims that Qin Yining sold the Hening garden that Pang Shao gave her to save when de Zhou's army besieged the city and the Yan dynasty suffered from drought and famine. Later, Qin Yining went to de Zhou with his father. People like Lu Dehan and Lu Jiu stayed behind in Dian to work in her field. Lu Dehan and Lu Jiu had known Qin Yining for a long time. Qin Yining had saved their lives, so they were loyal to Qin Yining. This time, they needed a new face to support the kanji factory. Qin Yining naturally thought of them. After discussing with Mr. Liao and Master Zhong, they decided that when it was inconvenient for Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhua to appear, they would use Lu Dehan. Lu Dehan works seriously, and he is simple and honest. Right now, he has changed his clothes and is only focused on guarding the kanji factory. The victims won't starve. Wang Fei, don't worry. That's good. Qin Yining said with a smile. Wang Fei is doing good deeds that save lives. Lu Dehan was also saved by Wang Fei. Now that you have ordered him to do such a good deed, he is 100% willing. He is also full of praise for Wang Fei and Wang Ye's characters. He keeps saying, Wang Yi and Wang Fei have done such a good deed, but I can't announce that I did it. I'm really wronged. Qin Yining shook his head and laughed. It's not like it's a good name. Some things will cause trouble if you yell at a meeting. But some people do good deeds for the sake of reputation. Compared to you doing things silently, those who only do it for the sake of reputation are nothing. Those who can do good deeds for the sake of reputation are also good people. If there are more people like that, the pressure on us to give out kanji might be reduced. Qin Yining lowered his voice and asked, have Zhao Yinhua and the others found out about the situation in the prison? Do they know where my grandmother and Zhao Wanjin are locked up? Master Zhong said with a smile, they should have found out. Liao Zhibing and Zhao Yinhua didn't tell me in detail. I think they will personally tell you when they come back. Qin Yining nodded and chatted with Master Zhong about the farmstead and the kanji. After an hour, Liao Zhibing and Zhao Yinhua also returned. Wang Fei, we have already found out about the situation. We have seen the old alliance head's cell and also found out where my older brother is. Zhao Yinhua's expression was extremely ugly. Without waiting for Qin Yining to ask, she said, the old alliance head's life is not in danger and she wasn't tortured. However, the cell she was locked up in was a wooden cage. She could only curl up inside. There was no beating, no scolding, and no one interrogated her. However, it was very uncomfortable. When our brothers investigated, they found that the hair on the side of the old alliance head's temples had all turned white. She was completely haggard. Qin Yining's heart clenched when he heard this. His hands tightly clenched his sleeves, and the sweat on his palms soaked his sleeves. She couldn't reveal her worries and uneasiness in front of her subordinates. If she panicked, how could she control them? However, she couldn't suppress the pain and uneasiness in her heart no matter what. Then what about Hall Leader Zhao? My older brother is still fine. He only suffered some superficial wounds and was whipped. However, my older brother's martial arts skills are high and he is a dual cultivator. These superficial wounds won't affect him at all. Moreover, he has already caused trouble in prison twice. He killed 2 prisoners who were deliberately looking for trouble and had a strong background. This made Historian Gao so angry that his nose almost became crooked. This matter was the second part of Qin Yining's plan. After Historian Gao incited the dissatisfaction of all the poor people, he used the matter in prison to incite the dissatisfaction of the rich people. Qin Yining had already investigated the 2 prisoners that Zhao Wanjin had killed. Which of the rich and the officials didn't have dirty matters in their manners? there were also many masters who killed people. If they broke the law, as long as they used their connections, they could find a scapegoat to replace them in prison. No matter how much they moved outside, even if they were on death row, they could be released after a year or so. As for the people who replaced their masters in prison, most of them were loyal servants of their masters. Some of them were hoodlums that were bought with large amounts of money. In addition, there were also some rich second generations who originally had a strong background. These people formed a group of mavericks in prison. They weren't really in prison for real. Apart from the fact that their living conditions were slightly worse, it wasn't impossible for them to live a good life in prison after bribing the prison guards. She had told Zhao Wanjin to look for those with strong backgrounds in prison and kill 2 of those who had committed all kinds of evil to establish their authority. Historian Gao was in charge of arresting criminals in the local prison and seemed to be quite popular. If these prisoners with strong backgrounds lost their lives in front of Historian Gao, then the rich people would point their fingers at Historian Gao. Qin Yining said, "It's all thanks to Hall Leader Zhao." However, he was injured because of this. If there's a way, find an opportunity to send some medicine to him. At the very least, don't injure his foundation. At this point, Qin Yining said apologetically, "In the end, it was because of my arrangements that Hall Leader Zhao was injured. I really feel bad about it." "Hey! Alliance Master, what are you saying? We're people of the Jianghu, and we have to be loyal to our friends. Even if we lose our arms and legs in order to save the old Alliance Master, it's worth it. Furthermore, we're all rough people with thick skin and tough bones. A few superficial wounds are nothing. Alliance Master, please don't take it to heart. If you don't take it to heart, then that's because you're loyal to your friends. However, I can't watch Hall Leader Zhao suffer with a clear conscience. I can only think of a way to make it up to him after the plan succeeds." Qin Yining still felt very apologetic. Zhao Yinhua casually waved her hand. Qin Yining was a benevolent alliance master. He wouldn't joke around with the lives of his subordinates. Even if they suffered some superficial wounds, she would still feel guilty, let alone when their lives were in danger. It was the alliance members' fortune to be able to follow such a benevolent alliance master. On the 29th day of the 12th lunar month, it started snowing in the old capital. Heavy snowflakes fluttered in the air, covering the entire dusty old capital with a layer of snow-white velvet carpet. The collapsed buildings and the cracked, mottled walls appeared even more dusty and dilapidated after the earthquake. At this time, all the servants and the young residents were very busy. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve. Although the residence had been completely cleaned on the day of the Little New Year, the snow that fell to the ground today was half melted. When people stepped on it, it would turn into a puddle of mud. Magistrate Yang liked cleanliness. If they offended him, they wouldn't be able to have a good New Year. When Librarian Gao was led into the residence by a servant, he saw that the courtyard was full of busy servants. He walked along the bluestone brick path to the study in the outer courtyard. A servant went in to report. Not long after, he came out and said, "Librarian Gao, the magistrate invites you in." Chapter 686. Magistrate Yang looked down at a book of poems as if he didn't see the person standing in front of him. His contemptuous attitude made Gao Gao very unhappy. But Gao Gao didn't have the courage to get angry at this time. He was all thinking about why his superior was unhappy. No matter how much he thought about it, he still couldn't figure it out. "Magistrate Yang, Gao Wenyao, pay my respects to you." After waiting for half an hour, Gao Wenyao couldn't help but salute again. Magistrate Yang flipped through a page of the book, cast a cold sidelong glance at Librarian Gao, and asked slowly, "Do you know why I asked you to come here?" "Yes, I don't know." "You don't know?" Magistrate Yang threw the book of poems in his hand on the table. The pen holder fell on the table with a bang. Please don't be angry. Gao Wenyao hurriedly saluted. Magistrate Yang was a newly promoted official after Great Zhou annexed Great Yan. He was originally an official of Great Zhou, while Grand Historian Gao was an old man from the old capital. Both of them were not familiar with each other, and as Magistrate Yang had always been an inconspicuous person, he had always been gentle and courteous when dealing with people. In front of Librarian Gao, he had never lost his temper like this before. Gao Wenyao clenched his fists and his muscles twitched. Magistrate Yang's face was gloomy and his eyes were full of resentment. He stood up angrily and pointed his trembling finger at Gao Wenyao. After a long time, he suppressed the reprimand that was about to come out of his mouth and said in a low voice, "Gao Wenyao, do you think I don't know what you're doing secretly?" Gao Wenyao shivered and lowered his head even more. Magistrate Yang walked around the table and slowly walked to Gao Wenyao. From Gao Wenyao's angle, he could only see the boots on Magistrate Yang's feet. "I don't care who you contact in private, who you ask for, and who you do things for. I don't want to get involved. But you have to have a sense of propriety when you do things. You have to know who you are working for and to what extent. I won't report it to the Imperial Court and I don't want to help anyone. But don't push your luck. What you're doing now has seriously affected the public order under my jurisdiction." Dianshi Gao finally understood. It seemed that Magistrate Yang knew that he was secretly loyal to Lord Jinan. He was a Dian to begin with, and used to be an official of the Yan dynasty. While the county king of Yan was now the king of Jinan, he still had the blood of the royal family running through his veins. Warden Gao had been ordered by the king of Jinan to capture Madame Zheng. He just didn't expect that something like that would happen to his son. Now, he was lying at home half dead, crying all day long. The 8 men were all strong and sturdy, and their movements were light and graceful. Librarian Gao had also practiced martial arts before. With one look, he could tell that these people were experts in both internal and external martial arts. Even if there were 10 of him, he would not be able to win against one of them. These bodyguards were even more valuable than Fergana horses. What kind of family would be able to afford such bodyguards? Librarian Gao stood in the corner and curiously craned his neck. He saw a bodyguard knock on the door, and the doorman quickly entered the estate. Not long after, he saw Magistrate Yang and a few female figures flash past the corner gate. Following that, the main gate of the Yang estate actually opened. One had to know that the main gate would not be opened under normal circumstances. Librarian Gao was even more curious. He hid himself in the corner and stared at the carriage intently. He saw the warm curtains of the carriage being lifted by a white hand, and a woman wearing a green cloak peeked out from inside. That woman was 16 years old, and her hair was combed into 2 rings. She wore a green dress and was dressed like a maid. Her appearance was indescribably beautiful, and she stood there charmingly, like a lotus blooming in summer. Even Librarian Gao, who had seen many beauties, could not help but suck in a breath of cold air when he saw that beautiful maid. That pretty maid lifted the warm curtains and leaned forward to support him. Following that, he saw a tall young master dressed in a white robe and a sable fur cloak get out of the carriage. When he saw the young master's appearance, Librarian Gao even forgot to breathe. He had only thought that pretty maid was a peerless beauty, but who would have thought that this young master's appearance was 100 times better than that maid's? Taking a closer look at the young master's walking posture and figure, how was this a young master? It was clearly a tall and handsome woman dressed in men's clothing. Librarian Gao had never seen such a beauty before, and he could not help but be stunned. Not only Librarian Gao, but even Magistrate Yang, who led his family to the door to welcome them, was also stunned at this time. The woman walked up to Magistrate Yang and saluted him in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. She was graceful and elegant. She didn't look feminine in men's clothes, but she didn't look manly or vulgar at all. Her voice sounded noble and self-restrained, and it was very appropriate to reveal a bit of friendliness. "Uncle, nice to meet you." Magistrate Yang finally came back to his senses, coughed, and returned to his normal appearance. He stretched out his hand to support her. "Miss Chiu, please don't be so polite." "Uncle is too polite, just call me Feishan." Chiu Feishan turned to look at the magistrate's wife behind Magistrate Yang. "Aunt, nice to meet you." The magistrate's wife was still a little confused, and there was some suspicion and inquiry on her plump round face. She politely squeezed out a smile and said, "Don't be so polite. It's cold outside, let's talk inside the mansion." "Exactly." Magistrate Yang nodded. Magistrate Yang and the magistrate's wife led Chiu Feishan into the mansion first. The doorman was busy removing the threshold, and the servants and guards drove the carriage into the Yang mansion from the front door, and then the gate was closed with a bang, completely blocking Librarian Gao's sight. Chapter 687. Your Highness, Librarian Gao went to visit Magistrate Yang today. Our people investigated carefully and found that it was Magistrate Yang who sent someone to look for Librarian Gao. Librarian Gao didn't take the initiative to visit him. Jingzhe had arranged for someone to secretly observe Librarian Gao. Now that he received the news, he immediately came to report. Qin Yining frowned slightly, pursed his lips, and muttered, "Magistrate Yang has been staying at home all this time. It seems that he doesn't want to interact with people, and he doesn't want to get involved in the chaotic situation in the old capital. Librarian Gao has angered the public and is now involved in trouble. If Magistrate Yang went to look for him at this time, it would go against his principles." "Your Highness, you're right. Magistrate Yang has always been neutral. When Wang Yi came, he didn't come out to welcome him. As for Jinan Wang, Magistrate Yang has never shown any intention of getting close to him." Qin Yining stood up and thought for a moment, then felt relieved. The city looks peaceful now, but in fact, the people and nobles are very dissatisfied with Librarian Gao. Since Magistrate Yang is a person who avoids disputes, he definitely doesn't want to see his subordinates cause trouble for him. He probably asked Librarian Gao to go over to tell him what to do next. "That's right." Jingzhe nodded and said mockingly, "Librarian Gao kidnapped the old madam, but he didn't expect to get himself into trouble. Not only did his son get into trouble, but he also angered the public. I don't know if he regrets taking the old madam away now that he thinks about it." Qin Yining shook his head and laughed. He was just following orders. Moreover, the person in charge of this matter must be someone who wants the South to be at odds with each other. To be more certain, this matter was most likely ordered by Jinan Wang. Librarian Gao thought that he was on the right side, but he made the wrong decision. It would be a lie to say that he doesn't regret it. That's right. If I were him, I would have some self-awareness and wouldn't cause trouble blindly. Not only did he bring bad luck to himself, but he also made the people around him suffer. Jingzhe's mockery was even more obvious. Although he was a silver-masked spy, he didn't like the Dian royal family at all. He despised incapable rulers and didn't have a good impression of cowardly rulers. Now, it was clear whether the Yuchi Yen wanted to restore the Dian for their own dream of becoming the emperor or for the welfare of the common people. Ever since Dian submitted to Dezhou did not treat the people of Yen differently. Instead, their lives were more stable. It was rare for them to have such stability. If he was an ordinary person, he would definitely hope that the people in power would stop messing around. After thinking for a while, Jingzhe said, "There's one more thing. Our men saw a special guest in front of the Yang residence." "Special?" "That's right. Magistrate Yang and his family came out to welcome them personally and even opened the main door to let them in. Qin Yining was astonished. Normally, the main door of a wealthy family would not be opened. What's more, Magistrate Yang and his family opened the main door to welcome them personally. In family Qin, when the Yuqi Yen visited the Qin residence when he was still the crown prince, their family had welcomed him in such a grand manner. Did you see what kind of guest it was? Yes. They said that it was a beautiful woman dressed in men's clothes. Because they were far away and the other party's voice was not loud, they only heard the woman call Magistrate Yang uncle. Qin Yining nodded slowly. It's almost the new year. Relatives will come to visit. What was strange was Magistrate Yang's grand attitude. In today's world, women's status was lower than men's. With Magistrate Yang's status, if this woman didn't have a noble or special status, why would he open the main door to welcome her with his family? Qin Yining didn't believe that they were uncle and niece. But now that she had something important to do, she didn't care about Magistrate Yang's private affairs. In the afternoon, Master Zhong, Xiao Yinhua, and Lu Dehan all came back. Princess Consort, will we start the operation tomorrow? Let's start tomorrow, Qin Yining said with some guilt. Tomorrow is the new year. It's a bit cruel to do that. But it's easier to succeed during the new year. Master Zhong said disapprovingly, Princess Consort, you're too kind. You've already done your best to help everyone get through this harsh winter. You don't owe them anything, and you don't have the obligation to feed them. You won't harm their lives. They won't die from starvation for a day. You can continue to give them porridge after rescuing the old madam. How can your kindness to them not offset their hunger for a day? Even so, I still feel a bit guilty. After all, although I sincerely helped them, I also took advantage of their anger. Master Zhong smiled and shook his head. Qin Yining was still young after all. He was too soft-hearted. Since they had decided on a plan, everyone went to prepare. The next day, when the commoners went to the square to get their porridge, there was no steaming pot under the porridge stall. They also couldn't smell the rich aroma of rice. Everything was fine yesterday. Philanthropist Lu even brought the shopkeeper to give us porridge. Why isn't he here today? Could it be that Philanthropist Lu went home to celebrate the new year? No, Philanthropist Lu wouldn't abandon us. He said yesterday that he would give us porridge as usual today. Could it be that he was caught by Historian Gao? Historian Gao specializes in catching good people who do good deeds. It was not known who said this, but very quickly, the news of Grand Historian Gao arresting the great philanthropist Lu, who had once again given the people hope for survival, spread from 1 to 10 to 10 to 100. In the end, the rumors became conclusive. Librarian Gao has gone too far. Previously, there was an old madam who wanted to do good deeds, but because she didn't give him enough money, she was thrown into prison. Then, he caught philanthropist Qian in front of us. Now, he's caught philanthropist Lu. He's deliberately trying to destroy us. Fuck that historian Gao. He doesn't care if he eats well and raises a son who chases chickens and dogs. Instead, he wants to bully us poor people. He doesn't even give us a bowl of porridge to eat. He's forcing us to die in front of his house. Die, what die? If I want to die, I'll beat that bastard to death first. A few of the refugees couldn't take it anymore and started cursing. Everyone's anger was raised another level by those vulgar words. They had been suppressing their anger for a long time. When they saw philanthropist Qian being beaten and caught, they became cowards in order to eat their fill. Their hearts were already filled with guilt. Now that they heard that philanthropist Lu was also caught, where were they going to find another good person to let them eat and drink for free? Since historian Gao doesn't want to give us a way out, we'd rather drag him down with us. Brothers, let's go raid his house and save all the good people who did good deeds. Yes, let Historian Gao release all the good people. If they saved the good people, they would have food to eat and hope to live. With so many people, they weren't afraid that Historian Gao wouldn't agree. The starving refugees roared angrily and squeezed in the direction of the Gao residence. Because the porridge was given out for a long time, the refugees who heard the news from the old capital all came over. Now, the group of refugees was no longer the initial 100 people, but a few thousand people. Other than the elderly, women, and children who didn't have any strong men in their families, those who were queuing in the cold to receive the porridge in thin clothes were mostly men in their families. Even if their stomachs were stuffed with hunger and their flesh was eaten away, making them as thin as reeds, the dignity and anger that belonged to men in their hearts finally exploded under the pressure. Therefore, when this group of nearly 1,000 refugees, more than half of whom were men, rushed to the front of the Gao residence, the gatekeeper was so scared that he bolted the door shut. Chapter 688. Even if the gatekeeper didn't say anything, the people in the residence all came out to take a look. The angry roars of nearly 1,000 people were too shocking. The refugees were so angry that they lost their minds. The Gao residence's doors were tightly shut, and they didn't even dare to fart. This gave everyone a lot of confidence and courage. The Gao residence was only one street away from the yamen, and the old capital's yamen was just a corner away. The uproar frightened the officials at the yamen's entrance, and they all hurriedly retreated back into the yamen and closed the door. When the commoners saw that none of the ferocious-looking officials dared to step forward, their confidence instantly increased. The men took the lead in cursing loudly. They picked up whatever they could get their hands on, such as rocks, mud, horse dung, etc., and threw it with all their might at the door of Historian Gao's house. Let philanthropist Chen out. Gao, you'll die a horrible death. Why don't you have any descendants? Let go of all the good people who did good things. The ones closest to the door were the happiest. Every time they hit the door would shake and leave a large piece of dirt. In the blink of an eye, the Gao residence's door, which had been decorated with red lanterns and couplets for the new year, was covered in dirt. It looked terrible. What was even more frightening was the majestic aura of the angry refugees. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if the Yan dynasty army that resisted de Zhou had this kind of imposing manner, the Pang Shao would have to put in a lot of effort to break in. What's going on outside? In the Gao residence, Gao Jinsher screamed and grabbed Gao Diansher's sleeve. Her palms were covered in cold sweat in her panic, and her sharp nails dug into Gao Diansher's arm. Gao Diansher pushed his wife away and quickly walked to the porch, listening to the roars outside. Although the shouting was chaotic, people were always very sensitive to their own names. They had a feeling. The people outside were all pointing at him and cursing. The level of vulgarity was unprecedented. Throughout his life, Gao Diansher had never been cursed at like this, let alone when so many people were shouting at him at the same time. That earth-shattering sound shocked everyone in the area and caused them to close their doors. A mass uprising was about to happen. Even if Librarian Gao had guts as big as the sky, he was now completely panicking. No matter who it was, being cursed and scolded by thousands of people at the same time, they would not be able to calm down. Master, what should we do? What should we do? Gao Jinsher also understood what was going on. Her voice was shrill and she grabbed Librarian Gao's sleeve again in fear. How could Historian Gao care about the Jin family at this time? She pushed him away forcefully and quickly ran towards the outer courtyard. As she ran, she ordered the servants to guard the courtyard, get your weapons and block the front and back doors. Don't even let the dog's hole go. Don't let those beggars break in. Once those people barge in, from top to bottom, including all of you, don't even think about living. The servants and guards who had long been scared to death forced themselves not to look like cowards. Their legs were weak as they scrambled to grab weapons, axes, door bolts, and even rushed into the kitchen to grab rolling pins. Gao Jinshi was so scared that she took a few steps back and hid in the room. She ordered the maids and older female servants around her to quickly carry the low cabinet to block the door. Quick, 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 don't let those stinky beggars barge in. But madam, master is still outside. Oh, I can't care so much. Gao Jinshi was shocked and scared. She retreated to the side of the bed and hugged the sleeping young Master Gao. She couldn't help cursing, that bastard didn't let us live a good life. He caused my son to lose his virginity. Now he has invited a group of thugs to our house. If those people break in, we women will lose our chastity. The maids and older female servants were so scared that they almost burst into tears. Not only did they block the doors and windows, but they also grabbed the scissors in the needle and thread dustpan. Those who didn't grab the scissors went to look for the hairpin in Gao Jinshi's dowry. They held the hairpin like they were holding a dagger and pressed their ears to the window to listen to the roars outside that were getting louder and louder. A young girl was so scared that her legs became weak. She fell to the ground and covered her mouth to suppress her tears. Although the women and children of the Gao family were like this, historian Gao recovered from his panic and became angry. After all, he had been domineering for many years. As a local tyrant, how could he be afraid of a group of poor beggars? In the past, he was the one who killed people. It wasn't the turn of this group of bastards to kill him. Historian Gao put on his official robes and carried his saber. He called the servants to protect the courtyard and angrily rushed to the front door. Outside the door, there was a deafening roar of anger. It was difficult for anyone not to be afraid of the momentum that was like a tsunami. Historian Gao suppressed the fear that was spreading in his heart. He held the hilt of his saber and ordered in a deep voice, "Open the door." "Master, we can't do that. Those people outside are a group of savages. If we open the door and let them break in, the residents will be finished." "Yes, master. Let's run." "Run where?" Historian Gao angrily rebuked the servant who came up with the bad idea and sneered, "Thousands of people can't break through a wooden door. If we only close the door, do you think they won't break in? I, the one surnamed Gao, can eat anything, but I won't suffer a loss. Open the door. Let me go and meet that stinking beggar." The servants didn't dare to disobey historian Gao's orders. His hand was tightly gripping the hilt of his saber. It was as if he could swing his saber at them at any time. In front of them was historian Gao and outside the door was a group of angry mobs. They didn't know which one to hide from first. Just as the crowd was hesitating, historian Gao had already angrily pushed aside the people blocking the way. He unlatched the door and personally opened the door. Holding his saber, he walked out in large strides. Angrily staring at the mobs in front of him, historian Gao's eyes were about to split open. He gritted his teeth and loudly shouted, still not quiet down. "Do you want to rebel? Do you want to die?" The refugees were stunned when they were reprimanded, and some of their voices grew weaker. After all, since ancient times, civilians didn't fight with officials. These commoners were used to being bullied. With their lowly status, they really didn't have the experience of fighting with someone like historian Gao. As a result, many of the refugees on the spot were stunned, and their shouts weakened. Historian Gao sneered and walked forward in large strides. He pointed his saber at the crowd and said, "Do you want to rebel? Hurry up and disperse. Otherwise, this official will call the army to suppress you. Do you know Prince Zhongshuan? You don't know who Prince Zhongshuan is, but you should at least know the Tiger Army's commander-in-chief, Peng Zhishi. Prince Zhongshuan was the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army. Now, Wang Yi is stationed in the army's barracks. If you continue to cause trouble, I will ask Wang Yi to flatten you mob. This was the same as pouring a bucket of cold water on the crowd. Pang Xiao had a fierce reputation. When he trampled the Dian, he besieged the capital. In the end, he beat the Yan dynasty's emperor until he had no choice but to submit a letter of surrender. He had completely destroyed the Dian dynasty's rule. He was a figure that made the Dian commoners tremble in fear. Chapter 689. At the corner of the street, Qin Yining was wearing a dark blue embroidered cloak and a guanine hood of the same color. Half of her face was hidden in the shadows. Seeing that librarian Gao was using Pang Xiao's identity to scare people, she couldn't help but sneer. Perhaps only such a shameless person would be able to teach scum like young Master Gao. Qin Yining was able to keep her cool, but the people around her couldn't take it anymore. They all gritted their teeth and cursed Librarian Gao along with the refugees. The citizens who had been shocked by Librarian Gao's mention of Pang Xiao finally regained their senses and cursed again. This time, the ones who dared to curse were the hot-tempered and righteous men. You corrupt official, let out philanthropist Qian and philanthropist Liu. Let out the old madam who has done good things before. You don't care about our lives, but you don't let others care about our lives. What kind of justice is this? Your family is decorated with lanterns and colored banners, eating and drinking well. Have you ever thought that our family members might starve or freeze to death? Let the good people come out. Someone took the lead and shouted, attracting everyone's attention. They had come for the matter of food. Cursing at Librarian Gao wouldn't help them achieve their goal. They had to make demands and force Librarian Gao to agree to them. The citizens were all shouting loudly. Even those cowardly refugees who had been scared stiff earlier were all in agreement, asking Librarian Gao to let them out. Nearly 1,000 people were expressing their opinions, and most of them were shouting angrily. This kind of a quarrel was something that Qin Yining had never seen before. Beside Qin Yining, Jingzhi and Master Zhong were silent. Master Zhong looked at Librarian Gao, whose face had turned green from being shouted at by so many citizens. He couldn't help but shake his head and say in a low voice, "No wonder there's a saying that water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize a boat. There are only 1,000 people here, but there's already such a shocking scene. What if all the citizens of the world are dissatisfied? They don't even have to do anything. Just one sentence from each person is enough to shock everyone to death." Qin Yining shook his head. That's the theory, but the premise is that all the citizens of the world have a common goal. What can make everyone have a common goal? Naturally, it's for mutual benefit. He raised his hand slightly, and the mink fur collar swayed in the wind, making the black mink fur look shiny and smooth. If we didn't come here for the same purpose today, we wouldn't be able to work together like this. Everyone has their own little plans. This was not to belittle the refugees' sense of brotherhood and justice, but the simplest and most obvious human nature. Humans were selfish, and they all wanted to protect themselves. If it did not involve something closely related to their own survival, how could they stand up for others and almost lose their own lives? Master Zhong was stunned, then he shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Princess Consort is right. If it wasn't for Wang Fei's ingenious plan to let everything happen at the best time, then the situation wouldn't be as oppressive as it is now. If Qin Yining hadn't acted at the right time, just based on the angry citizens, they wouldn't have been as angry as they were now, and wouldn't have gathered in one place. Maybe when they saw the signs of something about to happen, they would have shrunk their necks and run away. Therefore, the thousands of people gathered in one place for the same purpose. This scene made Master Zhong, Jingzhi, and the others feel great admiration. Wang Fei had always been this intelligent. She could always point out what the next step should be at the most crucial moment. She could always find the essence of the matter in the tangled and complicated situation, and think of better ways to solve all problems. As he spoke, Historian Gao's quarrel with the people became fiercer and fiercer, and he even pulled out his sword. The refugees were so frightened by Historian Gao's action that they fell silent for a moment. Yet the leader of the refugees was clearly provoked. Ignoring Historian Gao's sword pointing at him, he said loudly, "We didn't come here to harm unrelated people. We aren't as despicable as you to kill the innocent. That's right, we just want you to let the innocent people go. Not only are you not willing, you are pointing your sword at us. Could it be that whoever has a sword can be unreasonable? Do you believe that I won't cut you down first?" Historian Gao fiercely waved the sword in his hand. The threatened refugee wasn't someone to be trifled with. He immediately stretched out his neck and said, "Go ahead, if you kill me, there will naturally be people who will take revenge for me. In any case, I won't be able to live. Even if I don't get killed here, I will starve and freeze to death the next day. If I die now, it will be better." The refugees at the back were furious when they heard this. They all pointed at Historian Gao and shouted, "You dare!" Even though everyone's voices were chaotic, when everyone glared at him and threatened him, even Historian Gao felt some fear in his heart. When he said he would kill people, it was just to scare these people. It would be best if he could scare them away. He didn't expect that the refugees, who were usually as quiet and obedient as rabbits, who wouldn't even have the guts to say no, even if he were to slap them. Instead, the cowardly commoners who would always run away with their tails between their legs, were not even afraid of death today. If he really did touch anyone, the next thing that would be broken through would be his home. His wife, children, and several beautiful concubines would all be attacked by the refugees. His family's wealth would also be robbed clean. The consequences would be unimaginable. Just as the refugees were incessantly agitated, and the women and children in the residence were trembling like leaves in a storm, Historian Gao suddenly thought of a way to deal with it. "This matter wasn't my decision to begin with. I am just a historian, and I am only following orders. None of this was my idea. Even if you all block my door, it's useless." The refugees were stunned when they heard this. For a moment, they didn't know what to say. Historian Gao saw that the scene had quieted down, and the situation seemed to have eased. He let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that he had found the right method. Historian Gao continued in a loud voice, "I usually do things for the sake of the imperial court. Although I am strict, I do things impartially. I don't arrest people because I like it, but because I arrest people who are truly guilty. The people I arrest are all people who have violated the laws of Dezhou. Don't tell me that every person who impartially enforces the law has to face your crimes." Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Qin Yining narrowed his eyes and laughed in a low voice, "It seems that we have underestimated him. When he tries to quibble, his words are clear and logical." Master Zhong and Jingzhe's faces were full of contempt. They looked at each other, and Jingzhe immediately signaled to someone in the crowd with his eyes. "We don't believe you. You are clearly trying to shirk your responsibility. You see that there are so many of us, so you are afraid. You want to push the blame to others and fool us. There is no way. Don't you mean that someone ordered you to do this, and that this matter was done by an official with a higher rank than you? Ask him to come out. We want to confront that official and ask him why he is arresting people." The refugees, who couldn't even read a single word, nodded their heads in agreement. Everyone chimed in, "That's right. Ask your official to come out. We want to ask him." Historian Gao's face darkened. He didn't expect this group of people to be so difficult to fool. Ask for his superior. Could it be that he could invite Magistrate Yang over? Historian Gao stood rooted to the ground like a log and refused to say a single word. Someone took the lead and shouted, "You are obviously trying to shirk responsibility and fool us. Release philanthropist Chien. Release philanthropist Chien who has done good deeds." This person shouted angrily while waving his fists. Such a rallying action ignited everyone's heroic spirit, and they all shouted along. The Gao family's gate, which had only been quiet for a moment, was once again thrown into chaos. The refugees were even crowding in Historian Gao's direction. There were even a few angry refugees who stood at the back and couldn't reach Historian Gao. They all turned and rushed towards the nearby yamen. When the commotion started, the yamen's gate was already tightly shut. Only a few bailiffs had their ears pressed against the gate to listen in on the outside. At this moment, not only were the refugees not appeased, they even rushed straight towards the prefectural magistrate's office. All the bailiffs were in a panic, cursing Librarian Gao for throwing all the blame on them. They hurriedly went to find someone to block the entrance, fearing that the entrance would be breached by the refugees. The 1,000 or so refugees were divided into two groups. One group was cursing at Historian Gao, while the other group was rushing to break through the yamen's gate. The crowd's angry roars pierced through the clouds. Not to mention what the people in the Gao family would think if they heard this. Just Qin Yining, who was standing at the corner of the street, was deeply shocked by the scene. Her heart was beating wildly with the crowd. Everything was going according to Qin Yining's plan, but in reality, she wasn't happy at all. Instead, she was worried for these poor people. She was afraid that there would be casualties. If someone lost their life because of this, then it would be her fault. She would feel guilty. At this moment, the sound of hurried horse hooves suddenly came from the street corner. One of the bailiffs rushed over at top speed and shouted at Historian Gao from afar, "Magistrate Yang has ordered you to release Qian Gui immediately." At this time, Librarian Gao held his blade horizontally, and the blade was about to touch the commoners' bodies. Hearing this sudden roar, not only the commoners, but even Librarian Gao himself was stunned. The bright blade stopped in its place, emitting a cold light. Historian Gao's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as he looked at the bailiffs on the horse. The commoners also turned their heads and looked at the person who had come to pass on the message. That person felt uncomfortable from being looked at, and he shouted, "Gao Wenyao. Are you going to openly defy an order? The magistrate is a kind and upright person. He is a good official who thinks for the people. But you, for your own selfish desires, you are slandering the magistrate. You are slandering an official of the imperial court. The magistrate will definitely report this to his superior." "You. When did I slander the magistrate? You. Why aren't you going to release him? Are you still trying to stall for time?" Historian Gao's face was completely ruined by the reprimand, but he couldn't care less about it now. He could only appease the people around Magistrate Yang and get through this difficult situation. He would go back and ask for forgiveness from the magistrate. Chapter 690. The commoners immediately cheered. This was the first time that poor commoners like them had won against a noble official. Their lowly status had always been trampled into the mud by people like Librarian Gao. In the past, they didn't even dare to raise their heads to speak in front of Librarian Gao, wishing that they could curl up into a small ball to avoid trouble. However, today, the anger of thousands of them had caused even a domineering person like Librarian Gao to retreat, and even the prefectural magistrate to release them. It turned out that as long as these dust-like people were united, they could also find their dignity in this ruthless world and achieve their goals. The commoners cheered and jumped for joy, as if the other party's agreement to hand over Qian Gui was already an important milestone. Seeing this group of people jumping for joy, Librarian Gao couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. As for the servants in the Gao residence, they heard the curses outside rise and fall, before finally turning into cheers. They also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. If this group of rioters were allowed to break into the Gao residence, they probably wouldn't be able to survive. Just as the crowd was cheering, someone in the crowd suddenly said, "That's not right, Librarian Gao, we want you to release all the kind-hearted people. Didn't you capture philanthropist Liu? Did you capture a madam who was doing good deeds just because she didn't give you enough money?" Librarian Gao was originally smiling smugly, but his smile froze when he heard this. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of this, it was just that he had been too confident and was blinded. Previously, he didn't pay attention to this kind-hearted madam that the crowd was talking about. Even when Prefectural Magistrate Yang found him and reprimanded him, Librarian Gao didn't take it seriously. At least, he didn't have a clear understanding of his own actions. But now, looking at the crowd gathered in front of his residence and the scene that almost scared him out of his wits, he suddenly realized that perhaps today's riot wasn't purely because he had captured Qian Gui to avenge his son. That madam might be the real culprit behind all this. Librarian Gao's face was dark as he realized that he had gotten himself into a huge mess. Perhaps even if he released that madam, if someone wanted to avenge her, he wouldn't have a good time either. Fine beads of sweat began to form on Historian Gao's forehead. He didn't know who that madam was. He wasn't even sure if it was the Jinan King himself who ordered him to do this. This was because in his lifetime, he had done this kind of thing countless times, where he casually captured people and sold them a favor. This time, after receiving a large sum of money and a request, he also intended to get closer to him. This way, he could kill two birds with one stone. Naturally, Librarian Gao agreed without hesitation. "But whether we repay the kindness or not, what does it have to do with you, Librarian Gao, arresting people? Even if we did something wrong, we ate and drank for free from philanthropist Qian and philanthropist Liu. We don't have the ability to repay them immediately. Don't tell me that you, surnamed Gao, don't arrest people as you wish. Don't try to slander us here. You are a black-hearted person. If we are unbearable, then you are even more unbearable than us poor people." "That's right. Well said. Brother, you are right. Librarian Gao is scum." The crowd boiled over again. No one wanted to admit that they were scum. Moreover, everyone felt very wronged. Wasn't it because those officials didn't do a good job and harmed them? At this time, the officials were blaming them. It was simply ridiculous. Librarian Gao frowned. This time, he was more and more certain that the current situation was instigated by someone. Why didn't he see through it earlier? Even Magistrate Yang's scolding didn't make him see through it. Just as he was feeling conflicted and angry, a cry of alarm suddenly came from behind the crowd. Everyone looked back and saw the group of refugees who had rushed to the Yaman's entrance move to the sides. Two bailiffs came out, one on the left and one on the right, holding a tall and strong man in ragged clothes who was covered in blood. The man's hair was messy and there were whip marks all over his body. His head was lowered and he was unconscious. He was dragged forward by the bailiffs on his left and right. His feet were dragged on the ground, leaving a winding trail of blood. The refugees couldn't see what had happened clearly from afar. But those who were closer could recognize that the man covered in cuts and bruises was philanthropist Qian, who had given them food and clothes to wear. He was a man who was full of energy a few days ago. He came to the porridge factory early in the morning to personally cook porridge and scoop rice. He even helped to carry the grain. But now, he was tortured to such a state. The refugees who were closer to him had already started to cry. There were even some emotional people who rushed forward and fiercely pulled at the bailiffs on both sides. They screamed and cursed, "Why are you beating people? Why are you treating philanthropist Qian like this? You're a group of dog officials. You don't catch the bad guys and bandits, but you torture philanthropist Qian. You'll all die a horrible death." The two bailiffs had originally followed orders and braced themselves to bring philanthropist Qian out. Now that he was surrounded by groups of commoners, they were already impatient and hurriedly waved their arms like they were swatting flies. It wasn't easy to bring him in front of Warden Gao. The surrounding commoners were already in an uproar. They couldn't care less and threw Qian Gui on the ground. Just now in the prison, this man was full of energy and asked for wine and meat to eat. He even cursed the 18 generations of female ancestors of a black-hearted trafficker who specialized in kidnapping and selling children, causing dozens of children to die tragically. He even knocked out the man's front teeth. Who knew that once he left the prison and the Yaman's courtyard, this man would suddenly droop like a dog's tail grass that had lost its moisture. Now he was even pretending to be a dead fish, paralyzed on the ground and unwilling to move. Warden Gao's heart ached for his son. He didn't want to kill this fellow who kicked his son, so he kept him in the prison cell and slowly tortured him. What whipping, needle, tiger stool, all kinds of torture instruments, he wanted to let him taste them all. Finally, he wanted to cripple his lower body and break the bones in his legs inch by inch. He wanted to let him grow maggots in the prison cell, but he just couldn't die. Warden Gao felt that a quick death was simply being merciful to Qian Gui. But before he could use the torture methods he thought of, the commoners were already in an uproar. Yesterday, he had whipped this person dozens of times and he was very tough. Now, in front of these commoners, he was lying on the ground pretending to be dead. How could Warden Gao not be angry? Get up, stop pretending. Warden Gao used the tip of his foot to push the man lying on the ground. But in the eyes of the commoners, Warden Gao was humiliating and torturing him in public. He's already like this and you still won't let him go. How can you be so ruthless? And what about philanthropist Liu? Why don't you let him go? Everyone's roars had already reached the limit. Everyone's anger could only be vented by shouting. Everyone's throat was dry from shouting and they almost couldn't make a sound. In the quiet winter, where the Yaman and rich families gathered, even if one person shouted loudly, it would disturb the tranquility of the surroundings, not to mention thousands of people shouting at the same time. Warden Gao's eardrums hurt from the roars. If it was said that when this group of people gathered in front of the Gao family's gate, it was already enough to make him tremble in fear. But now, everyone's anger was directed at him like a tsunami, causing him to be so frightened that he didn't know what to do. I didn't catch the surnamed Liu. I don't know where he is. And this person, he's just pretending, his life isn't in danger. Bullshit your mother's dog. If he's fine, why is philanthropist Qian lying on the ground and not getting up? Do you still have any sense of humanity? Let him go. Let him go. If he doesn't let him go, we'll go save him ourselves. Philanthropist Qian is already like this, philanthropist Liu and that old madam who did good things before probably won't have a good ending. We'll go save him, we're not cowards who only know how to eat. The commoners roared like a surging flood, crazily rushing in the direction of the Yaman. In the crowd, even Qin Yining and the others who had been staying in the corner were squeezed like a small boat in the middle of a turbulent storm. The people around Qin Yining tried their best to protect her, but they were all squeezed until they couldn't stand properly. Qin Yining tried hard to stabilize her body and said in a low voice, "The time is right." She turned around and whispered to Jingzhe and Liao Zhibing, "It's up to you." "Yes, Princess Consort, don't worry. We'll definitely take advantage of the chaos to rescue the old alliance chief." Jingzhe and Liao Zhibing snuck into the crowd together and led a group of people in the direction they had planned beforehand. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.